Inside the Duke's office, the atmosphere is already heavy. Lady Aisha stands before His Grace while he calmly watches her from his seat. Then comes the question that immediately makes her heart drop. Lady Aisha, I presume you know why I have summoned you here. The poor girl can barely answer properly. Meanwhile, panic is already exploding inside her head. You see, Aisha has a secret. The most important rule of being a stan is concealment. A true stan survives by pretending to be a normal person, especially when they are a noble who must maintain an elegant image. And right now, our girl feels like years of hard work are seconds away from collapsing, because once Aisha becomes attached to something, she becomes terrifyingly devoted. That was true for every idol group she ever loved, and it did not change after she discovered Persona. In fact, it got much worse. Stanning was not just a hobby for her. It was her reason for breathing, her reason for working, and her reason for getting through each day. Most people would never understand it, but she could not help herself. And when she fell in love with the hero of the romance fantasy novel Persona, there was no turning back. The novel became a huge success, and its hero, Abel Louvremont, completely took over her life. Naturally, a stan wants to know everything about their favorite character, but the story had already ended, so there was nothing new to learn. Because of that, her obsession shifted toward the mysterious author who created Abel. Then came the author's fan signing event, the last outing she would ever make during her 27 years of life. Suddenly, everything changed. One day, she wakes up to unfamiliar voices. A worried woman calls out, "Dear Lord Aisha." Then a man cries out with relief that his daughter is breathing again. Just like that, her second life begins. She is now Aisha Escliffe, the daughter of a poor baron. Her family may not have much money, but they are kind. She has loving parents, a close maid named Anne, and a beautiful face. Still, adjusting is not easy. One morning, while Anne helps her get ready, the maid notices how distracted she has become lately. Aisha quickly brushes it off, but inside her mind, the pieces are already coming together. The Crescenta Empire, the name Louvremont, the blue gem in her hand. Then the shocking truth finally clicks. She is living inside the world of Persona itself, at a time when Abel is still a precious 7-year-old child. For a stan, this is basically a miracle. And because of that, her grand stan project begins all over again. Unfortunately, that dream now seems ready to become a nightmare. Back in the present, the Duke starts listing places where he has seen her before. A festival a year ago, a debutante ball in the capital. One coincidence after another. His sharp eyes notice details that should not make sense for a baron's struggling daughter. Sweat starts forming on Aisha's forehead. She desperately searches for an excuse, telling herself there is still a way out. After all, seeing someone twice is not enough to accuse her of stalking. But this is where things become truly scary. She knows exactly what kind of man she is standing before. In her mind, she can already picture the possibilities. A dagger, a knife, a trap, maybe poison. One thing is certain. The Duke adores his son, and if he believes someone has been following him, then our girl may be in far more trouble than she ever imagined. The situation keeps getting worse for poor Aisha. Standing in front of Duke Hades Louvremont, she is sweating so much that even he notices. Surprisingly, instead of immediately crushing her, the Duke calmly pushes a handkerchief across the table and asks if she is nervous. That simple act catches her completely off guard. Trying her best to stay calm, she quickly claims it is not nervousness at all and that she simply gets hot easily. The Duke glances around and casually agrees. After all, perhaps the room is too warm. It is the middle of winter, yet maybe the heating was turned up too high. Desperate to grab onto that excuse, Aisha immediately points at the fireplace and awkwardly laughs about how strongly it is burning. Unfortunately for her, the Duke is not interested in discussing fireplaces. He smoothly returns to the real topic. During his stay in the capital, his son Abel Louvremont received an extremely expensive anonymous gift, the Holy Sword of Santakri. Whoever sent it apparently believed anonymity would protect them. Sadly, they forgot they were dealing with a duke whose information network reaches everywhere. The trail led straight to Stanley Forliff. Then the Duke reveals something even worse. 3 years ago, that very noble began sponsoring Aisha's family. At this point, the evidence is piling up like a mountain. If she still wants to make excuses, he can keep going. The succession ceremony, the noble ball in the Central District, the public gatherings, one appearance after another. Before he can continue listing every event she attended, Aisha finally gives up and cuts him off. Yes, Your Grace, that is enough. Inside, she is dying from embarrassment. She truly believed she had been careful. She chose places where any noble could reasonably appear. Yet from the Duke's perspective, she probably looks like a completely obsessed woman chasing after his 10-year-old son. And honestly, that realization hurts more than she wants to admit. Meanwhile, her mind is already preparing for execution. This is Duke Hades Louvremont, after all. A man who spent his entire life fighting dangers, walking the line between life and death, and protecting Abel at any cost. If blood needed to be spilled for his son, he would not hesitate. So Aisha quietly accepts her fate. 27 years in South Korea, 3 more years inside the world of Persona, 30 years total as a master stan. Honestly, she feels she lived a pretty satisfying life. Even if she never gets to watch Abel grow up, maybe this is where her story ends. The Duke continues laying out the evidence. Years of pursuit, countless expensive gifts, traveling all the way to the dangerous north alone, risking her life without hesitation. Completely embarrassed, Aisha lowers her head and admits she has no excuse for her behavior. Then comes the moment that absolutely nobody sees coming. The Duke nods and calmly acknowledges that her devotion is unquestionable. In fact, he has never seen anything like it. Many women have claimed to love him before, but none have shown this level of persistence. None have displayed such unwavering dedication. He is genuinely impressed. Then, as casually as if he were discussing the weather, he announces that they should proceed with the marriage as soon as possible. And our girl is so mentally prepared for death that the words barely register. She automatically accepts. All right, I accept. A second later, reality finally catches up with her. Wait a moment, pardon me? The Duke smiles and repeats himself. He will do it. He will marry her. And just like that, Aisha's entire world comes to a complete stop. She was preparing for punishment, maybe even execution. Instead, she somehow walks straight into a marriage proposal. Talk about a plot twist. Back at Aisha's residence, Anne is helping with her hair when she suddenly brings up the topic everyone has been thinking about. Is she really going to marry Duke Louvremont? To Anne, this is wonderful news. Marriage is always good news, especially when the groom happens to be one of the most powerful men in the empire. But Aisha nearly jumps out of her seat. Is Anne crazy? Yes, she adores Abel, but marrying his father is a completely different story. She barely knows anything about Duke Hades beyond his face and his name. However, Anne is not convinced. In fact, she starts listing all the reasons why this marriage sounds like a dream. Aisha is already past the usual marriage age. The Duke is handsome, wealthy, and powerful. The tiny Escliffe barony being connected to the mighty Louvremont duchy is practically a miracle. Honestly, Aisha cannot even argue against most of that. Anne quickly realizes she may have pushed too far and apologizes, but Aisha simply admits that none of what she said is wrong. After all, it has already been 1 week and 4 days since arriving at the Louvremont duchy, and somehow the Duke still believes she spent years following his family because she was hopelessly in love with him. And that is exactly where the real problem lies. The #1 rule of being a stan is concealment. A proper stan acts like a normal person. Once Aisha develops an obsession, she becomes frighteningly devoted. It happened with every idol group she loved, and now she is in danger of exposing herself completely. While Anne continues working on her hair, Aisha quietly wonders what other reason the Duke could possibly have for proposing. At least one thing is fortunate. Anne has become familiar enough with her strange, stanning language to understand her rambling. Meanwhile, Anne has her own theory. Maybe the Duke was simply moved by Aisha's endless devotion. Maybe her dedication touched his heart so much that he decided to marry her. Then she lowers her voice and reveals something interesting. There has been plenty of gossip among the servants about the empty position of Duchess. That catches Aisha's attention immediately. The Louvremont Duchy is one of the greatest noble houses in the empire, so why is there still no lady of the house? And honestly, that is a very strange question. Years ago, Duke Hades found an orphan on the battlefield and decided to make him his successor. That orphan was Abel Louvremont. But for one of the empire's strongest men to suddenly name a child of unknown origin as his heir would have caused enormous opposition. To stop that opposition before it started, the Duke publicly declared Abel to be his own son and brought him into the duchy. Up to that point, everything worked. The problem was that the position of Duchess remained empty, and nobody knew who Abel's mother was. Officially, Abel was treated as an illegitimate child. It was still better than being an orphan, but that did not stop the servants and staff from looking down on the boy who had suddenly appeared. No matter how much Hades loved and protected him, Abel could never fully escape those subtle but cruel looks. Constantly aware of how others viewed him, he was forced to mature far too quickly and ended up having an unhappy childhood. The moment Aisha remembers this, her heart breaks. Poor Abel. Her precious hero suffered through all of that while growing up. Wiping away tears, she realizes once again that the biggest issue surrounding the Louvre-Mont family has always been the same. The position of lady of the house remains empty, and that vacant seat continues to create problems for everyone around it. The more Aisha thinks about it, the stranger this marriage becomes. Despite endless complaints from his vassals, Duke Hades never changed his position. Abel would be the sole heir of the Louvre-Mont duchy. Because of that, noble families with status equal to the duchy had no interest in sending their precious daughters into a marriage that would gain them nothing. Of course, there were plenty of women from lower backgrounds who would have gladly accepted the honor of joining the Louvre-Mont family, but the duchy's vassals rejected those candidates immediately. To them, such women were not worthy of standing beside the duke. Even with all that pressure, Hades stubbornly kept the duchess's seat empty. At some point, that position should have been filled, yet in the novel, it never happened. Why? Because Hades never lived long enough to bring home a wife. On Abel's 11th birthday, he died protecting his son. Remembering that detail makes Aisha's heart sink. Then Anne leans in closer and lowers her voice. According to rumors, Duke Louvre-Mont has carried feelings for one woman for a very long time. That instantly catches Aisha's attention. Anne continues her theory. Since that woman never became duchess, perhaps she came from a humble background. Maybe she was even Abel's mother. The moment Aisha hears that, she is completely stunned. No, that cannot be right. Abel is not even Hades's biological son. More importantly, if the Duke already has someone in his heart, then why would he suddenly decide to marry her simply because of her devotion? Honestly, that sounds terrible. At that point, our girl reaches her limit. She jumps to her feet and declares that there must be a misunderstanding. They need to clear this up immediately and pretend the entire thing never happened. Anne stares in disbelief. Is she really planning to cancel the marriage? Aisha fires back with a question of her own. If you were me, would you go through with it? Deep down, she cannot bring herself to sell Aisha Escliffe's life away, even for the sake of the Louvre-Mont family. Without wasting another second, Aisha marches straight to the Duke's office. When she enters, Hades is busy writing documents. Trying to be polite, she apologizes for interrupting and mentions that she came to discuss their marriage. Surprisingly, he immediately sets aside his work. Yes, he is busy, but he is not the kind of man who cannot spare time for his future bride. Hearing him casually call her, that sends another wave of awkwardness through her. She still cannot get used to it. Then tea is served. The moment she tastes it, she recognizes the leaves. This tea does not grow in the north. It is the same kind she drank back home. For a brief moment, she wonders if the Duke is being considerate. No, that cannot be it, right? Before she can think any further, Hades calmly drops another bombshell. The marriage documents are already being prepared and will be sent to Baron Escliffe as soon as possible. Aisha nearly spits out her tea. This man is moving at terrifying speed. He even lifts the paperwork and explains that he plans to deliver everything tomorrow. Then, with absolute confidence, he tells her not to worry. He knows this must feel too good to be true, but it is reality. There is no dream to wake up from. Aisha can only sit there, completely horrified by what she sees as his unbelievably inflated ego. Gathering herself, she finally tries to explain that she actually came to discuss the marriage. Unfortunately, fate has other plans. Before she can finish, a loud voice suddenly echoes through the room. "Father!" The shout is so sudden that it nearly makes her jump out of her chair. She turns toward the doorway and immediately sees Abel. Hades quickly scolds the boy, reminding him that Lady Aisha is an important guest and that he should apologize for his rude interruption. And that is the moment Aisha completely freezes. Wait, what did he just call her? An important guest? Meanwhile, Abel politely apologizes after realizing someone else is present. The second he steps inside, Aisha's heart practically explodes. Dear Lord, be still my heart. And then she finally gets a proper look at him. One glance is all it takes. Abel is cute. Absolutely, undeniably cute. And just like that, every thought about canceling the marriage suddenly becomes a lot harder to focus on. The moment Aisha gets a proper look at Abel, all her determination completely falls apart. Fine black hair, ruby-like eyes, and cheeks still soft with baby fat. Our girl is finished. Absolutely finished. At that moment, she wants nothing more than to pull him into a hug and cover his face with kisses. She had promised herself she would stay calm, but how is anyone supposed to stay calm in front of this level of cuteness? This cannot be real. No, wait, it is real. Hallelujah. The shock is so powerful that her body actually gives up on her. Before she can stop herself, she sways and collapses. Instantly, Hades rushes forward in concern, asking if she is all right and whether Abel's sudden appearance startled her. Meanwhile, the Duke turns toward his son and reminds him once again to apologize for his rude interruption. Abel obediently does exactly that, politely apologizing to Lady Ascliffe for entering without knowing she was there. And honestly, Aisha can barely process a single word. In her mind, she is screaming. Why is he apologizing? Abel has absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Somehow, she manages to answer calmly. Not at all. Then Abel shyly brings up something else. He thanks her for the gift she sent him before and apologizes for taking so long to express his gratitude. The moment she realizes he is talking about the holy sword of Sancticry, her heart melts all over again. Of course she remembers it. She went through countless difficulties to obtain that sword. How could she simply sit back and watch Abel get hurt while trying to obtain a treasure connected to a ruined imperial family? Secretly sending it to him had already been enough reward for her, even if finding it had not been easy. Before she can dwell on it, Hades casually reveals another misunderstanding. He knows the holy sword was intended for him, but he believed it suited Abel better, so he gave it to his son. He even hopes she does not take it the wrong way. Aisha is completely baffled. What is this man talking about? Did he not read who the gift was addressed to? Still, she politely assures him that she does not mind at all. Unfortunately, the moment cannot last forever. Hades tells Abel he may leave for now and return later if he wishes to discuss something. Inside, Aisha is dying. She does not want Abel to leave, but there is no way she can actually say that out loud. Abel politely excuses himself and walks away, while Aisha struggles to keep her rapidly beating heart under control. Honestly, she feels like she might faint again. How can someone be that adorable? Watching her reaction, the Duke becomes concerned. She looks unwell. Once again, he apologizes for Abel's behavior and explains that, despite appearances, Abel is an incredibly precious child. As the two of them spend more time together, he believes Abel will eventually grow fond of her as well. Then he gently returns to the reason she came. What was she trying to tell him? Is there something about the marriage that makes her uncomfortable? Is it because of his son? But before Hades can finish that thought, Aisha suddenly reaches out and places her hand over his. In a single instant, every plan she had made about canceling the marriage vanishes into thin air. With complete determination, she cuts him off and declares that she will be a good wife. And that, according to Aisha, is all she wanted to say. Just moments earlier, she had stormed over here intending to end the engagement. Then Abel appeared. One look at the precious future hero, and our girl's entire strategy collapsed like a house of cards. The moment Aisha returns to her room, all dignity disappears. She throws a pillow across the room, and Anne catches it while staring at her in disbelief. Is she really this happy? Oh, she is much worse than happy. Our girl is completely gone. She starts trembling as she remembers Abel's face, those shining ruby-like eyes, those soft chubby cheeks, those tiny hands. She can barely contain herself. She keeps talking about how adorable he is, how his lips quivered, and how she almost couldn't handle it. Meanwhile, Anne points out that children are always cute at that age, although Abel seems a little small for a 10-year-old. That immediately makes Aisha even more concerned. Of course it does. The first thing on her mind is food. Northern cuisine is bland, and Abel should be eating more. She wants to feed him properly. However, Anne quickly drags the conversation back to a more important topic. Just a short while ago, Aisha wanted to cancel the marriage. Now she is acting like she won the lottery. What changed? At first, Aisha admits she planned to confront Hades about his enormous ego and end the whole arrangement. But then reality hits. If she rejects the marriage now, it will look like she traveled all the way north just to see him. More importantly, she knows something nobody else does. In 1 year, Hades is destined to die. On Abel's 11th birthday, the boy's hidden power will spiral out of control. The only reason the story of Persona continues is because Hades sacrifices himself to save him. Without that sacrifice, there would be no hero. There would be no Abel Louvermont as the world knows him. Even though she feels sorry for Hades after finally meeting him, she cannot stop what is supposed to happen. The novel depends on it. Then another thought slips into her head. If Hades dies after they get married, wouldn't she end up living quite comfortably as the Duchess? The moment those words leave her mouth, Anne looks completely confused. Meanwhile, Anne is secretly wondering whether her lady is planning something far more dangerous. Still, Aisha has already made up her mind. She no longer feels any desire to correct the misunderstanding. If everyone wants to believe she has been secretly in love with the Duke from afar, then fine. That sounds better than explaining the truth. What she really wants is much simpler. She wants to be Abel's mother. Honestly, from her perspective, there is no better position in the world. Suddenly, she remembers something important and asks Anne for her handkerchief. Not just any handkerchief, but the one she has been secretly embroidering with Abel's face on it. The very special gift she planned to give him. Unfortunately, disaster strikes immediately. Anne does not have it. Aisha searches everywhere, growing paler by the second. Panic takes over. That handkerchief was nearly finished. She only needed a little more black thread to complete Abel's hair. Anne tries to calm her down, reminding her there are plenty of blank handkerchiefs, and she can simply make another one. Eventually, Aisha accepts that she may have to start over. After all, what wouldn't she do for Abel? Meanwhile, somewhere else, Hades is holding a white handkerchief in his hands. His fingers brush across the embroidery stitched onto it. As he looks at it, he remembers Aisha promising that she would be a good wife. He also remembers the fact that she traveled all the way to the harsh northern lands by herself. At this point, the Duke can only come to one conclusion. As expected, she is a strange woman, but a very interesting one. The day Lady Aisha and Anne go for a walk around the duchy becomes one of the happiest days of Aisha's life. Everything is peaceful until a voice suddenly calls out from behind them. "Lady Aisha, hello?" The two turn around, and to their surprise, it is Abel himself. Instantly, our girl's heart goes into complete chaos. She politely answers that she is out for a walk, but inside her head, she is having an entirely different conversation. "Of course I'm on a walk. But what is our cute and lovable Abel doing here? Has he eaten? Did he have dessert?" Meanwhile, Abel stands there with a serious expression and begins apologizing for what happened the other day. He explains that he was in a hurry and does not think he greeted her properly. He even worries that she must have formed a bad opinion of him and promises to keep the conversation short so he will not bother her again. At this point, Aisha is completely stunned. Poor Abel is apologizing when she does not think he did anything wrong in the first place. She tries to respond, but before she can explain herself, he pulls out a flower and offers it to her. It is a thank you gift. Compared to the expensive present she sent him, he calls it humble. The moment Aisha sees it, both she and Anne freeze in shock. A thank you gift. A real thank you gift. Made by Abel himself. For her, the emotional damage is immediate. Our girl nearly collapses on the spot. Her poor body simply cannot handle this level of happiness. As the world starts spinning around her, Abel becomes concerned and asks if she is all right. Meanwhile, Aisha is already planning her funeral in her head. "Even if I die right now, I swear I'll be buried wearing that flower crown." Thankfully, she manages to pull herself together just enough to hear Abel worry that the gift might be too shabby and unsuitable for her. The second those words leave his mouth, Aisha practically rushes forward to stop him. No, absolutely not. She quickly assures him that she truly likes flowers. The truth is much simpler. Even if he handed her a piece of trash, she would probably treasure it forever because it came from Abel. Hearing her answer immediately brightens his mood. He admits he had been worried about what he would do if she disliked it. Aisha sincerely thanks him and promises she will take good care of it. That response makes him smile even more, leaving her completely confused. Why is he so happy? Is it because she accepted the gift? Because she thanked him? Because she liked it? Before she can figure it out, Abel makes one more request. If it is all right with her, could she put the flower crown on her head? The question hits like lightning. Aisha's eyes widen in disbelief while Anne, realizing her lady's brain has stopped working again, quickly takes the flower crown and places it on her head herself. The moment Abel sees it, he is completely amazed. To him, she looks beautiful. She looks like a fairy. And just like that, our poor fan reaches her limit once again. Down she goes. Honestly, after hearing words like that directly from Abel, Aisha feels she could leave this world with no regrets. For a devoted fan, this is nothing less than a perfect moment. Inside the Duke's palace, the air is already heavy, and the Count stands before him, clearly unsettled. He questions how the Duke could handle something as serious as marriage for the great house of Lovermont so casually, as if it is nothing at all. But the Duke remains calm, almost cold in his simplicity. If I get married, I get married. If I don't, then I don't. Where's the problem? That answer only makes the Count more frustrated, and he pushes further, insisting that the Duke does not even understand the real issue. He should have chosen a family that truly fits the Lovermont name. Instead, he should stop being stubborn and abandon the idea of making that illegitimate child the successor. At that, the Duke finally turns fully toward him, voice firm and unshaken. He has already made himself clear. There is no intention whatsoever of overturning his decision about Abel. That alone shuts the room for a moment, but the Count refuses to stop, going further with sharp words about how this marriage, this unknown daughter of a nameless noble, and an heir of uncertain origin will only bring ruin. He even calls it youthful passion gone too far. The Duke lets out a tired sigh, as if the whole argument is nothing but noise. He is always serious, he replies. It is the Count who cannot even pretend to listen. Then, almost casually, he mentions that his wife arrives tomorrow, so they should prepare the heir and begin the agreed lessons. Conveniently, the Baroness Cliff's daughter is already here, and she will be in charge of it. That same woman the Count claims he is so infatuated with. But the tension does not end there. The Count adds one last cutting remark, speaking about how his wife will surely be curious to meet the woman tied to the child she practically raised as her own son. Then, with a sharp turn, he heads for the door, only to freeze when he sees Abel standing there. A cold look passes between them before the Count dismisses the situation with one last insult, promising to return tomorrow, and leaves. The door shuts, leaving silence behind. Abel stands there for a moment before speaking up, apologizing to his father for another mistake, for always barging into the office without thinking. The Duke only sighs, pressing a hand to his head, admitting it is good he is learning, but also pointing out his timing could not have been worse. Another minute of that old man's talking, and it would have taken 10 years off his life. Before Abel can respond further, he is suddenly grabbed and lifted by his father like it is nothing. While carrying him, the Duke asks if he visited Lady Aisha, and Abel's face brightens immediately. Yes, she liked it. Really, really liked it. That answer alone seems to lift the Duke's mood. A flower gift, Abel explains further. A crown he made himself. Not perfect, not polished, but she still liked it very much. The Duke hums, then asks who else was there. Anne, Abel explains, the maid who came with Lady Aisha from Escliffe Barony. Kind, just like her. Before he can finish, the Duke cuts in sharply, surprised, asking if they took a stroll. Abel quickly corrects him, saying it was the three of them. Anne was there too. The Duke relaxes slightly, pretending he already knew. As they continue walking, Abel talks more, unaware of the subtle shift in his father's expression. Ever since Lady Aisha arrived, she and Anne have been walking daily around the detached palace during the day. Lady Aisha even tells him how happy she is, and that makes him happy too. He hugs his father lightly as he speaks, completely sincere. But inside, the Duke's thoughts grow quieter and heavier. They have become close, closer than expected, closer than even him. And then comes the question that lingers. What made her so happy? The flowers, most likely. Abel explains that she kept touching the flower crown he gave her. She liked it so much that she must truly love flowers. Even the thought that she might have been acting just to spare his feelings crosses his mind, but he pushes it away. No, she really must love flowers. Inside Lady Aisha's room, Anne steps in and immediately notices something worrying. Aisha is already awake, but her face tells a different story. Tired eyes, clear eye bags, and a restless energy hanging over her. Anne can't help but ask if she even slept at all. The answer comes quickly. No sleep at all, only excitement. Even so, Anne insists she should have rested. She brings a bowl of water and gently urges her to wash her face. But as Aisha lowers her head, her mind is already far away. Nothing about this situation feels simple to her. A reverse tribute, a reward for being a stan. She never imagined something like this would ever happen. And then it hits her again, the image of that small flower crown, made with those chubby little fingers. Just thinking about it makes her emotional all over again. Her smile grows without control, her thoughts spiraling into pure admiration. She is completely done for. The urge to hug and shower him with affection becomes too much to hold back, and before long, she smacks the table in frustration, overwhelmed by how strongly she feels. Anne quickly moves to calm her down, handing her a cloth and telling her to hang in there a little longer. At least wait until she gets closer to the young master. Then she helps her dry her face and get ready. While doing so, she casually mentions something that immediately shifts the atmosphere. A kitchen maid had said His Grace requested to have a meal with her. That alone makes Aisha freeze in shock. Why now? Why suddenly a meal together? In her mind, she wonders if this is real. The Duke has never once shown up in the dining area like this before. Anne, meanwhile, tries to make sense of it, suggesting maybe he is not as cold and distant as the rumors say, especially with the marriage approaching. Soon after, the scene changes to the dining hall. The Duke and Lady Aisha sit alone across from each other as the sound of plates fills the silence. And yet, Aisha can't help it. Her eyes drift toward him. He really is good-looking. The Duke, without hesitation, notices and calmly remarks that he understands she can't take her eyes off him, but she should still focus on her meal. That instantly makes Aisha regret everything. Still, she quickly regains herself, apologizing politely and promising to eat quietly. The Duke dismisses her apology and instead comments on her appearance, noting that she is extremely slim, unlike any noblewoman he has seen before, and even asks if she is really eating properly and not skipping meals. Aisha is caught off guard by his words, slightly thrown off by how direct he is. She assures him she enjoys eating and does not skip meals, and maybe she is just not someone who gains weight easily. But the Duke doesn't stop there. He shifts the conversation to Countess Goosefell, who is expected to arrive in the evening and most likely stay for dinner, asking if she will be comfortable with that. The mention immediately rings alarm bells in Aisha's mind. Goosefell is not just any noble. She is someone who repeatedly shows up in the story just to mistreat Abel. As Abel tries to explain who she is, Aisha cuts in and calmly states that she already knows, identifying her as his elder sister. That shocks him completely. Though in Aisha's mind, the situation is far more complicated. She remembers that the Countess is not purely a villain, but someone whose attitude toward Abel shifts later on, making everything feel uncertain. The Duke, slightly amused, assumes she knows everything about him already, so there is no need to explain further. Aisha internally panics at that misunderstanding, since she never meant that at all. Still, he continues, explaining that the Countess wants to meet her before the marriage, so she should be prepared. Hearing that, Aisha can only accept the reality settling in. A sudden meeting with the in-laws? Already, things are moving faster than she ever expected. The Duke leans forward, fully focused on Aisha as if nothing else in the world matters right now. Then comes a calm suggestion, a stroll in the garden after the meal. He even adds that Abel mentioned she likes flowers. Just like that, the idea of the garden pulls her attention in. Aisha agrees, and before long, the two of them are walking together outside. As they move, the Duke brings up Abel, saying the boy looked truly happy yesterday, probably because of her kindness. That makes Aisha pause a little before answering softly that Abel seemed happy. And honestly, she is glad to hear that. The Duke thanks her as well, admitting he knows Abel being around might have felt uncomfortable, yet she never showed it. But Aisha quickly pushes that thought away, saying there is nothing uncomfortable at all. That child is too cute and lovable, and she enjoyed it more than anything. Then, almost shyly but honestly, she adds that if possible, she would like to go on more walks in the future, not just for herself, but to get closer over time. The Duke agrees easily, saying he will try to make time, but she quickly corrects him, explaining she meant walking more with young Master Abel. The misunderstanding clears instantly, and the Duke simply says he doesn't need permission for that, and Abel would probably love it too since he seems fond of her. That answer lights up Aisha's face with pure happiness. As they continue walking, Aisha's gaze keeps drifting toward him, And suddenly she notices something else. The Duke looks tired. Without thinking too much, she points it out, mentioning the dark eye bags and his messy hair. The Duke pauses, slightly caught off guard, then turns away and fixes his hair, asking if it looks better now. But she quickly steps in closer, gently fixing it herself until she smiles and says, "It looks better now." And just for a moment, Aisha finds herself staring at him, thinking how unbelievably close he feels to the kind of charming, heart-fluttering male lead she once read about. Especially the way he looks right now, like a character whose heart is about to be shaken by meeting a heroine for the first time. She tries to stay calm, but honestly, he is just too handsome, and she can't fully hide it. However, that peaceful moment shatters in an instant when the Duke suddenly grabs her hand and notices something. His eyes fall on the gem on her hand, and he pulls back her sleeve slightly, studying it with a serious look. Then he speaks, pointing out that in Crescenta, there are still people who can't even hide something like this at such an age. Aisha freezes completely, her body trembling as the mood shifts in a single breath. In the world of the masterpiece novel Persona, everything is built around two things: the perfect protagonist Abel, and the rich fantasy world that surrounds him. Long ago, the Crescenta Empire was said to have dragon-like imperial blood, just like classic fantasy tales. These dragons were not just myths, but beings filled with immense magic, and their descendants, the Crescentians, inherited fragments of that power. Magic in this world is divided into 6 elements: fire, water, earth, wind, light, and darkness. Every Crescentian is born with one of these elements, and that determines their path in life. The Lovermont Duchy stands at the top of noble power, famous for producing strong fire element users through its long, proud history. Even Hades Lovermont is known as an exceptional figure among them. But talent is never equal. For every gifted mage, there are countless others with weak or no special ability. The Ascliffe Barony is one such case, carrying a strong, light element bloodline. Yet strangely, it has never produced a saint or healer, and real magical talent is almost absent there. But what truly defines every Crescentian is something deeper, something hidden inside the body itself, a jewel core, a glowing source that represents their element. That gem on Aisha's hand, it is her jewel core, and in this world, that core is not just power, it is also a fatal weakness. One wrong hit, and it can mean instant death. Because of that, everyone is taught from childhood to hide it, to internalize it naturally as they grow, like learning to walk. But shockingly, Aisha Escliffe, the so-called backwater noble who never even appeared in the original story, reached 18 without ever learning how to properly conceal it. A flaw so basic, yet so dangerous it should have ended her life long ago. Back in the Duke's palace, the truth leaves even Hades Lovermont stunned. The moment he sees her exposed jewel core, disbelief hits him hard. "How have you survived until now?" The words come out before he can stop them. Aisha, almost awkwardly, mentions she must have been very careful with her left wrist all this time, but that only makes things worse. The Duke presses his hand to his head in frustration, pointing out how even a child could do better, and how absurd it is that she chose the most exposed place possible. Aisha quietly agrees, even though she knows she cannot really explain it. But the Duke is not done. His concern turns serious as he explains the danger clearly. In this world, a wrist like that could be ended with just a single grip. If someone ever targeted her, there would be no time to react. Aisha tries to brush it off, wondering who would even bother killing someone like her, but the Duke shuts that down immediately. Once she steps into the Lovermont Duchy as his future wife, danger will follow her. He admits it plainly, he has many enemies, and they would not hesitate to use her against him. That reality finally sinks in. Aisha falls silent. For the first time, she starts to understand something she never seriously considered before. Not just the fantasy story, not just Abel, not just the novel she knew so well, but her own life in this world. All this time, she had simply existed, grateful to breathe the same air as Abel, fascinated by her connection to the story's heroine. But living as Aisha Escliffe, surviving as herself, that was something she had never truly prepared for. Lady Aisha lowers her gaze, voice soft, almost shaken, as she apologizes to the Duke. She feels useless, not fit for something as heavy as the duty tied to the Lovermont name. All she knows how to do, in her own words, is nothing of real value. The weight of it pushes her down until she ends up sitting with her head lowered. In her mind, she already accepts the harsh truth she believes about herself. Even her inability to hide her jewel core feels like proof that she has no place here. Compared to someone like Deborah, the capable female lead she remembers from the novel, she feels painfully lacking. If something ever happens, if the Duke or Abel were to return injured, she believes she would only stand there useless, unable to help at all. The Duke, however, cuts through her spiral immediately. Calm but firm, he calls her name and makes her look up. Then, in a move that catches her completely off guard, he drops to one knee and takes her hand. His voice is steady as he tells her there is nothing she needs to worry about. In this empire, no one would dare touch him, and the same goes for Abel. He is their shield, their protector. As Abel's father, it is his duty to deal with any threat long before it ever reaches them. And as her future husband, it is also his duty to protect her. Looking straight at her, he promises that not even a single hair on her head will be harmed. She doesn't need to carry thoughts of his injury or death, because he is strong enough to make sure those things never happen. Instead, she only needs to worry about herself. But those words land heavily on Lady Aisha, because in her mind she already knows what he does not, a man she sees as destined to die in just 1 year, standing here so certain of tomorrow. And just as that thought lingers, the moment shifts again with news that the Duke's elder sister arrives at the palace, adding yet another weight to what is already becoming an uncertain future. The Duke walks down the stairs slowly, clearly deep in thought, as Aisha's words keep repeating in his mind. Her voice, her doubts, her belief that she is useless to the Louvreman name, it all lingers. She had even said she might have helped a little if Abel ever got hurt. And strangely, that thought hits harder than expected. The Duke narrows his eyes slightly in his own mind, almost frustrated with himself, wondering when exactly things turned into this. Since when did he start worrying so much about her? Meanwhile, the next day arrives, and Lady Aisha steps into the dining area, only to find Abel already seated alone. The moment he sees her, he straightens and greets her politely, and she carefully asks to sit beside him. His response is immediate and respectful, almost too formal, as he says he is honored. Aisha notices it again, that soft, gentle behavior that makes her heart feel strangely light every time. But then she notices something else. Abel doesn't look relaxed. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she asks what's wrong. The boy hesitates before revealing that Countess Gatsby is coming tonight to tutor him, and that it's making him nervous, like he is not good enough. That immediately changes something in Aisha's expression. Without hesitation, she reassures him, telling him there is no child more excellent than him. But Abel shakes his head, still unsure, and even brings up yesterday's walk, saying he doesn't understand why she pays attention to someone like him, someone he believes only causes trouble for his father. That hits Aisha quietly, and she gently places her hand over his, trying to calm him. For a moment, Abel looks at her closely, then suddenly holds her hand back and says something that completely catches her off guard. He wishes she would marry his father. Not only that, but he talks about how he doesn't even want to inherit the title, how he would gladly let a younger sibling take over if that meant Aisha would stay, because he doesn't want his father to be alone. He apologizes for the burden, but sincerely wishes for a kind, beautiful person like her to remain by the Duke's side. Aisha pauses, slightly confused at the mention of a younger sibling, but then a soft smile forms in her mind as she realizes the truth of his feelings. So, it is not jealousy. It is just this child worrying about his father dying alone. And somehow that thought warms her. She quietly agrees, calming him, even if her emotions stay a little tangled. But that moment doesn't last long. Suddenly, the doors burst open, and Abel immediately straightens and announces the arrival of Countess Gasfell. The Countess walks in without warmth, taking her seat across from the Duke and Aisha, her gaze sharp and heavy. The atmosphere shifts instantly, tension filling the room as introductions are made. Aisha gathers herself and introduces as Lady Aisha Escliffe, from Baron Escliffe Estate, showing proper respect. The Countess responds coldly, stating they will be seeing each other often, and names herself Mason Gasfell, before also introducing herself as Agatha Gasfell, formally addressing Aisha as Lady Escliffe. Aisha politely returns the greeting, but the conversation quickly turns sharp. The Countess immediately brings up her journey north to offer her hand in marriage, and before Aisha can even explain properly, Agatha cuts in with biting words about shame and self-awareness, mocking the idea of traveling just to pursue a man. Aisha's eyes widen at the sudden insult, and before the silence can settle, the Duke's voice erupts in anger as he demands to know if she has lost her mind. But Agatha does not back down. She turns the accusations straight at him, questioning whether it is him or her who is truly mad, and boldly states that bringing in someone with no magical talent and no notable ancestry will stain the Louvremont bloodline. That final insult breaks the tension completely. The Duke rises, cold and sharp, and with a bitter laugh admits that she has already made up her mind. He calls himself a fool for believing this could work, and just like that, the atmosphere in the room shifts from tense silence to something far more dangerous. The Duke steps in closer and gently suggests that Lady Aisha should eat in his room instead, trying to pull her away from the tense atmosphere. But even before the moment can settle, her thoughts spiral. This woman standing before her is no ordinary noble. Agatha Gaciel, Hades' older sister, the one who practically raised the Louvremont estate in place of the disgraced Duchess, the one who shaped Hades into who he is now. A mother figure in everything but name, and someone even the Duke cannot defy, and yet, her words are sharp, almost cutting. As she sips her wine, she reduces everything to something cruel and blunt, questioning what Lady Aisha truly has to offer, and even mocking the idea of how she won Hades over. Love twisted into obsession, care turned into something far too intense. Aisha can feel it clearly. This is not a person who lets things go easily. Before the tension can cool, the Duke orders everyone to return to their rooms, even telling Abel to leave as well. But Lady Aisha remains seated, her mind already turning fast. With Agatha's deep hold over the family, this household will never truly be free of her influence. That thought hardens her resolve. If she wants to stand beside Abel and survive this future, she cannot avoid this confrontation forever. So, suddenly, she raises her hand and steps right into the fire, asking them to calm down and insisting the Countess may have misunderstood something. The Duke tries to shut it down immediately, telling her not to waste time and just go back to her room. But Aisha refuses to retreat. Instead, she directly faces Agatha, saying she doesn't want to accept being misunderstood by someone she respects, and boldly asks what exactly about her is being judged. That unexpected courage lands like a shock in the room. Even the Countess pauses, clearly taken off guard by the girl who was supposed to quietly leave but instead chooses to confront her head-on. Lady Aisha stands her ground, forcing herself to stay calm even though fear creeps down her back. She asks again what exactly the Countess disapproves of, trying to keep her voice steady. But Agatha wastes no time cutting into her, calling her foolish for even needing to ask such a thing, clearly looking down on her. The tension tightens instantly, but Aisha doesn't step back. Instead, she responds carefully, speaking about knowing one's limits, saying that if someone takes what doesn't suit them, it only leads to harm. The Countess watches her closely, then fires back with a sharp question: does she truly believe she fits the Louvremont name? Aisha answers without hesitation. She admits she understands herself well and has never chased the Louvremont name, insisting that this is a misunderstanding. She even softens her tone, explaining that she understands why Agatha feels this way, since she has worked hard for the duchy's reputation and likely wants a wife who properly matches the Louvremont status. Even if Aisha believes she is not suited to be a duchess due to her family background, she says she would accept it if the Duke decided she should remain low in status. In her mind, she carefully avoids sounding greedy, knowing this kind of misunderstanding could be dangerous. Then she continues, sincerely insisting she did not come north out of ambition and asking not to be judged harshly. But Agatha immediately presses harder, questioning why a woman of marriageable age would come all the way to a bachelor duke's manor. And with that, Aisha finally speaks the truth, calmly placing a hand to her chest and admitting she came because she wanted to see him, meaning Abel. That single sentence shocks everyone in the room, while Abel himself stands confused. Aisha quickly follows, lowering her tone and shifting the focus, saying she understands the Countess's deep feelings for the Duke and even expressing respect and admiration for her. She calls her someone she has always looked up to and sincerely wants to build a good relationship with. She apologizes, saying any wrongdoing comes only from her inability to stop herself from coming to see Abel, which caused all this misunderstanding. As she speaks, she even holds Abel's hand, trying to ground the moment in sincerity rather than tension. But Agatha's response turns even sharper. She tells Aisha she understands her place now and admits she was too harsh. Then she goes further, suggesting that even if Aisha is not suited to be the Duke's wife, she could still remain around him as a mistress, since she is unknown yet properly mannered. The suggestion hangs in the air like a blade, leaving Aisha stunned as she tries to think of a response. But before she can speak, a hand lands on her shoulder. The Duke steps in, trying to interrupt Agatha, but the situation explodes when he suddenly shouts her name in anger. The outburst shocks both Aisha and Abel, and Aisha quickly realizes how dangerous this moment is for the child hearing such words. Her thoughts race she needs to remove Abel from here before he hears anything worse. Meanwhile, Abel, overwhelmed by the tension, can only whisper in a small voice, begging for it to stop. A memory from the Duke's room plays out like a quiet echo from the past. Abel walks in cautiously, calling out to his father, unsure if he was summoned. The Duke confirms it and, noticing the boy's hesitation, asks why he came in such a rush. Abel immediately apologizes, lowering his head, admitting he shouldn't have barged in like that. Instead of anger, the Duke looks surprised, even a little softer, saying he may have been too harsh earlier and apologizing for frightening him. The tension fades as he gently pats Abel's hair, a rare moment of warmth between them. But then Abel reveals something unexpected. He had overheard the maids talking about the Duke's marriage to Lady Escliffe and came to congratulate him. The Duke, slightly amused, admits word spreads fast and confirms the marriage plans, even saying it would be good for Abel too, like having more than just a father. That makes Abel hesitate, asking if the lady would even be happy with him around. The Duke answers honestly that he is not sure yet, but assures him Lady Escliffe is not a bad person and might grow fond of him if they get closer. Still, he reminds Abel that effort matters too. Abel quickly insists he will try his best, not because he doubts himself, but because he fears upsetting her. He even worries that if she finds out his feelings wrongly, she might dislike him. The Duke responds by comforting him, saying he doesn't need to force himself so much, because he deserves love as he is, and Lady Escliffe will likely like him naturally. But Abel still insists on trying, then shyly asks to take 10 flowers from the garden to give her, carefully promising to thank the flowers as he picks them. The Duke, moved by his sincerity, hugs him and agrees without hesitation, saying everything in the garden was planted for him anyway. In that moment, Abel's wish becomes clear. He sees Lady Escliffe as someone bright and kind, almost like a fairy queen, and he wants her close, even hoping she could become his mother. That memory lingers. And now, in the present dining hall, it erupts out of him as he suddenly stands up, voice trembling but firm, begging the Countess to stop speaking badly about Lady Escliffe and insisting she is not a bad person, even offering to take the blame himself instead. The moment Abel tries to defend Lady Aisha, the Countess snaps, her voice rising sharply as she demands to know where he learned such a thing and what exactly he is talking about. The tension spikes instantly, but before she can finish, Lady Aisha cuts through the moment herself. Calm but firm, she addresses the Countess, politely ending the dining scene and saying she will meet her again during her stay. She then turns to Abel, gently tells him to come along, and stands up without hesitation, leading him out of the dining hall, leaving the room frozen in shock behind them. The Duke is the first to react. His expression darkens as he turns on the Count and Countess, questioning how they could sit there and allow such words to be spoken, demanding if they have lost their minds and if they even understand what should never be said. But the Count only brushes it off, touching his chin and claiming he sees no problem at all. That answer only makes things worse. The Duke's patience finally snaps as he calls out Agatha by name and demands she apologize properly to Lady Escliffe, making it clear that even as his sister, he will not tolerate this. But Agatha only grows harsher, mocking him, insulting his choices, questioning how he could bring a woman of lower status into their house and call her his wife, even saying he should think about the Louvremont name. The Duke immediately fires back, warning her to watch her words and reminding her she has no right to interfere in his life, whether it concerns his marriage or the duchy itself. He orders her once again to apologize. But instead, she fires back again, calling Lady Aisha someone beneath them and accusing the Duke of being manipulated. That is the final line for him. The Duke turns away, declaring that Abel is his son and Lady Aisha is the woman who will become his wife, and if they cannot be treated with respect, then he owes them nothing in return. Before leaving, he gives Agatha one last warning, cold and final. Outside the dining hall, the situation shifts into something softer but heavy with emotion. Lady Aisha gently tells Abel she will be leaving, trying to calm the situation, but the moment he hears it, he panics and grabs her hand tightly, begging her not to go. His voice breaks as he insists he will protect her, that he will stand up to the Countess himself so she should not leave. Seeing him like this, sobbing and shaken, something in Aisha softens completely. She crouches down, wipes his tears, and assures him she is not going anywhere. Abel, still worried, asks if she is hurt because of what just happened. Aisha quietly reflects on it all, wondering how far this kind of emotional strain has been going on for him, and whether something like this can really be forgiven just by changing later. But she pushes those thoughts aside and gently reassures him again, telling him she is fine and asking about him instead. Abel insists he is fine, but his concern for her remains. Finally, Aisha smiles and promises him once more that she is okay, and that she is not leaving, especially not when they have not even had the chance to grow closer yet. Only then does Abel finally calm down, asking one more time if it is true, and she confirms it softly, leaving him a little more at ease. In a sudden burst of emotion, Abel clings tightly to Lady Aisha, wrapping his arms around her without warning. Aisha freezes for a moment, caught off guard, her mind trying to process what just happened. Abel quickly pulls back, flustered, apologizing again as if he had done something wrong. But instead of stopping him, Aisha's thoughts soften in a different direction. Deep inside, she even wishes he would hug her again, just once more. And as if he can feel her warmth, Abel calms himself and leans in again, this time more gently. Looking up at her with uncertainty, he asks if she dislikes him at all. That question hits her lightly, and without hesitation, she answers in the simplest truth. Why would she ever dislike him? Anyone who does must be strange. The words come out with surprising honesty, even affection, as she admits he is the most adorable child she has ever seen. She likes him. No. She even says she adores him. That immediately lifts something in Abel's heart, and he thanks her quietly, relief washing over him. But Aisha's thoughts drift deeper for a moment. She begins to understand that the novel's line about his unfortunate childhood had been far too light, almost careless. The reality is heavier. Time here does not flow like a simple story. Abel has to live through every painful moment fully. That realization settles in her mind, and she quickly shifts her focus to him instead. Asking if he is hungry, she gently tells him he should rest and eat later, guiding him back toward his room. Before he leaves, Abel clings to one more reassurance, asking if she is truly not going anywhere. And with steady calm, she promises she will stay. Then, with a small, thoughtful pause, she even offers to stay until he falls asleep. That alone is all it takes. Abel brightens immediately, smiling and agreeing. Later that night, the quiet of the room deepens. The Duke enters and finds a scene he did not expect: Lady Aisha lying beside Abel, who is already asleep, her presence calm and steady as she gently helped him rest. Without a word, the Duke removes his jacket and carefully places it over her. He stands there for a moment, simply watching them, his thoughts drifting as he reflects on how she has been caring for Abel so naturally. To him, it feels almost foolish, yet strangely sincere. She even claimed she came just to see Abel, speaking so openly without embarrassment. As he thinks this, Aisha suddenly stirs and opens her eyes, turning toward him at the exact moment he is watching. Their eyes meet in surprise, the quiet room suddenly holding a tense, unexpected stillness between them. The moment Lady Aisha opens her eyes and sees the Duke standing there, she snaps fully awake. No panic, no delay, she quickly gathers herself, lightly grabs him, and signals for silence. Then, as quietly as possible, she slips off the bed, careful not to disturb Abel, who is still sleeping peacefully. A soft smile crosses her face as she looks at him. Only after that does she turn back to the Duke and whisper that they should go outside. Once they are out of the room, she returns his coat to him and thanks him calmly, as if nothing unusual just happened. But the Duke does not let it pass so easily. He asks if Abel had thrown a tantrum to make her stay, suggesting she should have simply refused if she was uncomfortable. That question makes Aisha pause, but she immediately shakes it off. No, she wasn't uncomfortable at all. She had already chosen to stay on her own, and she explains it simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That is when the Duke shifts the topic, apologizing for the Countess's behavior, admitting he already told her to apologize properly. But Aisha only tilts her head slightly, confused by the apology. She insists there is no need for that, not even from the Countess, Because honestly, it wasn't as bad as it seemed. The Duke reacts instantly, questioning how she can say that after everything. The memory of the Countess's harsh words flashes through Aisha's mind, but even then, she speaks carefully. She admits she did not like being treated that way, but she also understands where the Countess is coming from. A woman like that values status deeply and had once intended to inherit the duchy herself. The Duke quickly corrects her, stating that she did inherit it, but Aisha continues, calmly explaining that if the Countess had succeeded the inheritance, she would naturally have prioritized the duchy's reputation when choosing a marriage partner and heir. People simply have different views of what is right and wrong, and that is something she accepts. The Duke looks at her, confused that she is explaining all this after being insulted so openly, but she continues anyway. Unfortunately for the Countess, the inheritance went to him instead, and she is now stuck with expectations she built her whole life around. That is why, in Aisha's eyes, the Countess's dislike makes sense. The Duke immediately tries to deny it, insisting that is not the truth, but Aisha calmly responds that she did not come here out of greed to become his wife anyway. She simply came after packing her things all the way to the north because she wanted to see someone able. The Duke then presses further, warning her not to talk as if she would ever take back the marriage, firmly stating he never breaks his word. Aisha thinks to herself that he has completely misunderstood her meaning, assuming she desires the marriage itself. But before she can correct it, he continues, even telling her she should feel free to act more boldly. He reminds her that as the future Duchess of Louvremont, she will stand just below royalty and should not be overly forgiving toward those who disrespect her. It is not her role to tolerate such things. Aisha listens, then quietly admits she is not the Duchess yet, before sighing in frustration and muttering that everything suddenly feels too stuffy. Lady Aisha nearly loses her balance, the moment tipping into danger before the Duke quickly steps in and catches her. In that close moment, he holds her steady and firmly reminds her that he will never take back what he said about their marriage. Their eyes lock for a long second, heavy and quiet, like neither of them is willing to look away first. Aisha's thoughts start to swirl. Is he telling her to fight beside him? He looks so serious, so certain. After a brief pause, she finally smiles and agrees, saying she will do it, though deep down it almost feels unreal, like something she cannot truly imagine herself doing. The next day, inside the library, Abel sits quietly by himself, watching the clock with a small, tense focus. He already knows the moment it strikes 12 noon, the Countess will come for him. And just as expected, the time arrives. The Countess enters with a maid beside her, and Abel immediately stands, bows politely, and greets her arrival. Without wasting time, she orders him to sit, then puts on her glasses and opens a book, cold and strict. She declares that since he has no proper sense of manners, today's lesson will be etiquette, followed by a test after he studies the entire book. Abel only nods and quietly accepts, his eyes falling on the heavy stack of books in front of him as he begins to read and write under her watchful gaze. Every so often, the Countess looks up at him, observing him closely, until eventually she speaks his name. She points out that he seems to really like Lady Aisha. That question catches Abel slightly off guard, but instead of avoiding it, he gathers his courage and speaks up. He makes a request asking her not to treat Lady Aisha badly. The Countess pauses, clearly surprised, and asks him to repeat what he just said. Abel straightens himself, his voice small but determined, explaining that he is not asking for anything for himself. He promises that he will do everything she asks of him, follow every instruction, and never speak out of line, just like he listens to his father. In return, he asks her, almost pleading that she treat Lady Aisha well. He bows deeply after saying it, leaving the Countess quietly watching him in silence, studying him closely after hearing those unexpected words. The Countess Agatha lifts her gaze the moment Abel pleads for Lady Aisha. Her expression sharpens, and she fires back coldly, twisting his words with no mercy. So now he is asking her not to speak to Lady Aisha the way she did yesterday, especially after he himself shouted so rudely at her. The accusation lands heavy. Abel instantly panics and apologizes, shrinking under her gaze, but Agatha does not soften. She adjusts her glasses and goes further, questioning where the well-mannered Abel learned to interrupt adults by yelling in such an impolite way. She even claims she could not sleep at all because of how shocked she was, and then pushes it even further, suggesting he must have learned such behavior from the Duke. Abel quickly shakes his head, trying to defend his father, insisting that the Duke would never act like that, but his voice breaks under pressure, and he ends up calling himself a bad child instead. That is all Agatha needs. She immediately agrees, saying he has no sense of proper manners at all, and reminds him once again that he must not bring shame to the Louvremont name. If he commits a mistake, punishment is the only way to stop it from happening again, just like how she was raised. Abel stands there trembling, quietly accepting it. The Countess continues, adding that the Duke never criticizes his manners because he loves him too much. Abel weakly agrees again, and at that moment, a maid brings in a rod of correction. Agatha calmly states she will consider his request about Lady Aisha, but if he truly wants her to be treated kindly, he must also show effort himself. Abel immediately agrees, nodding quickly without hesitation. Then everything turns colder. The Countess takes the cane from the maid and stands up, circling around Abel as she questions whether he has any objections to being punished. She even says she would rather not proceed if he refuses, since it would be troublesome if the Duke finds out. But Abel, still shaking, insists he will accept it because he made a mistake. That is enough for her. She gives her final order, remove his shoes, and kneel on the chair. Without protest, Abel obeys. And just like that, the punishment begins, leaving the room heavy with silence and tension as the weight of her discipline falls on him. Lady Aisha is back with the Duke, trying once again to make her magic work. She keeps forcing herself to focus, eyes wide and serious, as if sheer determination alone can make it happen. The Duke, already sitting nearby reading a book, glances at her and immediately comments in his blunt way, asking why she is opening her eyes like that. He tells her to stop that and instead focus properly, to feel the energy inside her body. But Aisha only turns toward him, frustrated, and admits honestly that if it were that easy, she would have already been taken by the temple and become a sister long ago. The Duke doesn't soften at all. He reminds her that someone who can't even hide their core stone cannot become a sister, and casually tells her she has big dreams. That comment lingers in her mind as she reflects on everything happening around her. A butler had already come right after breakfast to bring her here, to train with Hades on hiding her core stone. Hades keeps insisting that as a citizen of Crescenta, she should try to bring out the energy inside her, but for her, it feels impossible. Inside her thoughts, she admits the truth. Her core stone being exposed is already a huge problem, but worse than that, she can't even feel anything from it no matter how hard she tries. It feels like useless, beautiful trash stuck inside her. Then the Duke bends down closer, shifting the mood slightly. He explains that not everyone in Crescenta can use their core stone power, saying that about a third of people simply cannot. It's not that she is incapable, but that she is normal. Only pure-blooded people can use it freely. That word catches her attention immediately. Like him? She asks, and without hesitation, he confirms it. Yes, like him. That sparks her curiosity, and she asks him to show her that amazing power. Almost immediately, the Duke reaches out and touches her palm. In that moment, Aisha feels his hand is warm, almost unusually so. She becomes amazed, realizing in her mind that because his fire attribute controls heat, he can even raise his body temperature like this. She even comments that it feels like a hand warmer, suddenly understanding why he wasn't shivering despite wearing such light clothes. Curious, she keeps holding on, still feeling the warmth, until he suddenly pulls his hand away and asks what she is doing. Aisha quickly apologizes, saying it just felt nice and warm. The Duke then brings up that she had once mentioned being sensitive to cold, though she can't even remember when she said that. He tells her she doesn't need to make excuses and should just say it if she wants to hold hands. Confused, she asks what he means, and he casually replies that he is not stingy with skin. That makes her freeze instantly. How could she even... She starts to protest, but he insists it is fine, adding that although they are not close yet, they will be married soon anyway, so they should become closer. Then, without hesitation, he stretches out his arm and tells her to take it. Aisha refuses, but he immediately repeats it, telling her to hold on. She pushes back again, saying she is fine, while wondering in her mind why he is acting like something terrible will happen if she doesn't. The Duke warns her she won't get another chance, and at that point, her thoughts spiral should she just give in. Why is she even trying to avoid embarrassing him? Finally, she sighs and agrees, politely placing her hand in his while asking him to show her how to hide the core stone. The Duke's eyes widen slightly at the sudden acceptance, his usual confidence flickering for a moment as he tries to recover and continue explaining. The Escliffs are known for one thing above all else, the light attribute flowing through their bloodline, carefully preserved and passed down for generations. Yet, in Lady Aisha's case, that proud history feels almost meaningless. Sitting beside the Duke, she quietly wonders if learning to use that light would even help her at all. The Duke responds with a calm but practical tone, agreeing it would be useful, though he reminds her that the light attribute is very rare. Those words only deepen her thoughts. Inside her mind, Aisha spirals into frustration. She was never born with enough mana to properly use her ability in the first place. That weakness must have grown worse with her generation. Otherwise, a core jewel that should naturally be hidden with age would not still remain exposed like this. The Duke watches her silently, then reassures her again not to worry. He insists he would not need her help anyway, because no one would ever be able to even scratch him. But instead of comfort, those words only push her thoughts further. She realizes he is misunderstanding everything again, even if part of it is not entirely wrong. In the original story's timeline, Abel's future suffering and the Duke's fate are things that could have been prevented with enough power. Yet she cannot even use hers. That helpless gap makes her feel even more useless. Her mind drifts to Deborah Florence, the female lead of Persona. Fire represents violence, but light represents virtue, a power that can heal both body and corrupted minds. And in Abel's case, that power is the only thing that can truly save him. Without it, his condition would collapse into both mental and physical decay. Others who tried to absorb that corruption with weaker light ended up dying instead. That is why Deborah stands alone as Abel's only true salvation, the only one strong enough in light to purify him completely. Because of that, the story made her existence absolute. Anyone else with light was never meant to matter. Just background names, discarded without thought. And as Aisha connects everything, the realization hits hard. She is not even part of that world's supporting cast. Not a heroine, not a side character, just nothing important. A pebble by the roadside. Even with her bloodline, even as the only daughter of her house, even as someone who cannot even hide her core jewel, she feels completely erased from meaning. Her thoughts sink deeper. She once hoped that maybe, after arriving in this world, she would awaken something special, something that would finally make sense of her existence. But that hope quietly breaks apart. It is not going to happen. She is, by her own conclusion, truly useless. The Duke notices her silence and immediately tells her again not to force herself. But instead of answering, she drops her head onto the table and admits it out loud she really is useless. Then, almost softly, she asks if even he is frustrated with her. The Duke, without hesitation, rejects the idea. He says he always tells Abel the same thing, and now she is doing it too. There is nothing to worry about because he is here. Aisha lifts her head slowly, looking at him with a faint, complicated expression. So that is what he means he will stand there, strong and perfect, protecting everyone without letting even a hair on their heads be harmed. The thought only deepens the strange contradiction inside her, because in her mind, he is still someone who will die in 1 year. But then she sits up properly again, changing her tone. Even so, she points out that he cannot know everything that might happen. He often goes to dangerous places. If something happens to him, she could end up a widow at a very young age. In her mind, she is speaking about that 1-year fate, but he does not understand the meaning behind it at all. He only asks if she is worried. Aisha admits it quietly. A little. And just like that, the Duke reassures her without hesitation. He would not be irresponsible enough to die and leave his wife alone. The words land simply, firmly, as if it is the most natural promise in the world. In that quiet moment, their hands meet and hold, sealing a strange calm between certainty and fear, neither of them fully aware of how fragile that promise truly is. After training outside, Lady Aisha walks back with Abel, her mind already heavy with fatigue. She quietly admits to herself that today's training felt almost pointless, and all she really wants now is rest. Still, even through that tiredness, a small warmth lingers. She is genuinely glad that Abel looks far more cheerful than she expected. As they continue walking side by side, she glances at him and thinks how the worry she had about the Countess feels a little lighter in this moment. She knows Abel is still young and she must stay careful, but just being able to walk like this with him feels like a rare comfort. Then Abel suddenly turns his head and looks at her, catching her attention. She notices it right away and gently checks on him, asking if he is comfortable. He quickly brushes it off, saying it is nothing. Still sensing something, she asks if he is tired, reminding him of all the classes he has been through, and even suggests they should head back if he needs rest. But before she can finish, Abel reaches out and holds her hand, stopping her from leaving that thought behind. With a small, earnest voice, he insists that he does not want to go back yet. He wants to keep walking. Being with her feels nice, and he is not tired at all, so she should not worry. That simple honesty hits her in a soft way. As she looks at him, she cannot help but think that no one could possibly be cuter than this child. Then Abel brightens even more, telling her something he proudly shares, that he told his father she likes flowers, and because of that, the Duke had the gardeners plant many new ones. He even points toward them as proof. Aisha reacts with mild surprise, then quickly hides her thoughts, noticing how the Duke seems more thoughtful than she first assumed. Maybe he is just affectionate in his own strange way, or maybe the whole idea of his woman is not as simple as she thought. Still, she calmly tells Abel that she did not know that, and suggests they should thank the Duke later. Abel immediately agrees, happily saying his father is a very good man, and adding that she is also nice. That praise makes her almost lose her composure. Looking at his round, innocent cheeks, she briefly thinks she wants to squish them, but immediately catches herself and forces her emotions down. "Calm down, Aisha. You are getting carried away." Instead, she simply agrees with him, saying the Duke is far more affectionate than she expected. Yet inside, her thoughts deepen again, drifting into something heavier. She remembers how, in the original story, everything leads to his death. The idea suddenly twists her chest. What would it feel like to see someone so kind die in Abel's place? The thought alone feels horrible. Abel notices the change in her expression right away and asks if something is wrong. She quickly denies it, saying it is nothing serious, just her own problem. But Abel, still concerned, gently asks if she can tell him, saying he might be able to help. For a moment, it feels like she really might speak. Instead, she bends down slightly, closes the distance, and softly tells him it is a secret. Abel freezes in surprise, eyes widening, completely caught off guard by her sudden hush. Lady Aisha gently rolls up her sleeve and shows Abel the cursed stone on her hand. The moment he sees it, his eyes widen in shock. He immediately recognizes it and calls it a cursed stone, his voice turning serious as he asks why she is not hiding something like that. His reaction alone makes her realize how serious it looks, and she quietly thinks to herself that, yes, this really must be worrying to anyone who sees it. But instead of panicking, she calmly explains that it is not that she refuses to hide it, but that she simply cannot. She does not even know how to hide it in the first place, and even the Duke was not pleased about it. Hearing this, Abel softens right away. He quickly reassures her that it is not her fault and tells her not to be sad. That gentle reaction brings a small smile to her face, and she thanks him while calling him amazing. She even praises him for learning how to hide his own curse stone at such a young age, saying most people need to be much older than 10 to do it, but geniuses are clearly different. Abel immediately shakes his head in embarrassment, denying that he is a genius and firmly saying that not being able to hide something does not make her stupid either. He takes her hand and repeats, almost urgently, that she should not be sad. But then his tone shifts slightly as he reminds her that this kind of thing is dangerous and must not be told to anyone. For a moment, Aisha agrees in her mind, but Abel himself quickly realizes something important: she is not just anyone. He corrects himself and says he will protect her, so she will not be in danger. That simple promise makes her smile softly as she thanks him. Later in the day, back in her room, Anne arrives. Lady Aisha immediately gets to the point, asking if Anne can try to get closer to the maids in the duchy. She admits she does not understand the atmosphere here at all, and there is something she needs to find out. When Anne asks what it is, Aisha explains carefully that she wants information about how the employees treat Abel, whether they look down on him or abuse him, and if so, how far it goes. To help her, she even hands over expensive jewelry wrapped in a handkerchief, reminding Anne that during the 3 years working with her, she has learned that such things are often useful when gathering information. Anne accepts and begins her work. While blending in and eavesdropping, she notices how careful the maids are, as if they are hiding something. Soon, she manages to catch their whispered conversation. One maid mentions that she always knew the Countess was frightening, but did not expect things to go this far. She even talks about Abel still wanting to go on a walk despite everything. Another maid adds that Abel himself is not normal either, Though with Duke blood running in him, it is not surprising. The first maid then insists that Abel probably went out just to please Lady Escliffe, trying hard to stay in her good favor. In their eyes, he is just a child trying his best. The conversation shifts again, turning more uneasy. One maid wonders if the Countess is really allowed to treat Abel so openly, and what would happen if the Duke found out. Another responds that the Countess is particular and would never punish him if he refuses, implying that Abel would never report anything anyway. Even if the Duke learns something, Abel would not go against what he has already accepted. As the tension lingers, Anne suddenly steps in, trying to question them directly, but the maids quickly shut it down. They act innocent, claim they know nothing, and immediately leave the moment she presses further, ending the exchange in a suspicious silence. The maids try to slip away, clearly uncomfortable, but Anne is not having it. She steps in firmly, blocking their escape with a calm but sharp voice. "Nothing bad will happen, even if I know," she says, pointing out that they aren't even the ones who directly mistreated Abel. So why are they acting so nervous? Curiosity is written all over her face, and she makes it clear she hates being left in the dark. If she's going to stay at the duchy from now on, then there's no point wasting time pretending. They should just talk properly and get to know each other. And just like that, she even removes the jewelry Lady Aisha gave her, as if she's done playing around. Not long after hearing everything from them, Anne rushes straight back to Lady Aisha, breathless with what she has learned. Lady Aisha listens quietly, sitting down on the sofa, her mind already heavy before Anne even finishes. Then the truth comes out clearly. Abel wasn't just being taught etiquette. The Countess allegedly punished him under that excuse. The punishment was harsh, so harsh that his feet were torn and bleeding, and the floor had to be cleaned afterward. The water in the bucket turning red. A child. A 10-year-old child. That thought alone presses down heavily. Anne can't hide her worry as she reminds her that children should be guided with words first, not pain. And then, as she continues speaking, she gently questions whether Lady Aisha really knew what she was stepping into, whether she even realized what kind of suffering was happening under that so-called education. But Lady Aisha is no longer fully in the room. Her thoughts drift deep, pulling her backward into memories she never wanted to face. A father who drank, a mother under constant stress, a childhood filled with shouting, curses, and being hit again and again. Even when she grew older, the emotional scars never truly left. She remembers thinking she had forgiven everything, telling herself she was fine now, but that was never the truth. The pain stayed buried, showing itself in dreams, in silent moments, in the way old memories still hurt, and now Abel. It feels too familiar. A child suffering and calling it normal. A system where pain gets disguised as discipline. Even if she understands where the Countess is coming from, she cannot simply stand still and accept it. Because abuse is not something that becomes right just because time passes. Suddenly, Lady Aisha stands up, no hesitation. Anne quickly calls after her, worried, asking where she's going, telling her to calm down and think again because the Countess is not an ordinary person. But Lady Aisha keeps moving. She's going to see the Countess. Nothing changes her mind, not even Anne's warning. In her heart, there's a strange determination, almost like she's stepping into a game she once thought she understood, a game about raising favorability and surviving interactions. But unlike a game, this is real. And she realizes something painful about herself, too. She has never been good at this kind of thing, never succeeded at it. Soon, she arrives at the Countess's place. The atmosphere is calm, almost too calm. The Countess takes a slow sip of tea and looks at her with quiet expectation, already aware of why she is there. Lady Aisha bows and confirms it, saying she has something to say about what happened yesterday. The Countess simply observes her, composed and unreadable, then requests something unexpected, asking if her maids can be dismissed. Lady Aisha pauses for a moment, hearing that request, the tension quietly rising as the conversation is about to truly begin. The maids quietly step out, leaving only Lady Aisha and the Countess sitting across from each other. The air instantly turns heavy, like something is about to break. The Countess casually finishes her tea and even asks for another drink, acting calm as if nothing is wrong. But Lady Aisha does not move. Instead, she cuts straight through the act, cold and direct, telling her to get it herself and then dropping the real question without hesitation. "Did you hit my son?" That question hits the room like a stone. The Countess freezes for a second, clearly surprised, then quickly shifts her expression and tries to twist it. Manners are thrown at Lady Aisha like insults, her being called rude, shameless, and worse, as the Countess claims she has finally shown her true self. But Lady Aisha does not flinch. Calm, steady, she calls it out as a misunderstanding and reminds her that she only showed basic courtesy before, and even that was only because she was supposed to become family. Then, without backing down, she repeats it again, sharper this time. "Did you hit my son?" The room tightens even more as the Countess finally snaps, wearing an angry smile and defending it as education, insisting she raised Hades the same way and that she is simply continuing what the Livermont family always does. But Lady Aisha sees through it all. Her thoughts turn heavy, remembering Abel, remembering that same cruel idea of so-called education, and just like that, something in her shifts. Her finger presses lightly against the table, and her voice turns colder. If it is education for a child, then by that logic, the same treatment should be returned, shouldn't it? If Abel's punishment caused blood, then the same standard should apply. That single line finally breaks the Countess's calm. She erupts in anger, standing up, calling her shameless, losing control as she tries to threaten her position and question her place. But Lady Aisha does not even step back. Instead, she stands her ground and declares it plainly. She will be the Duchess soon, and she has every right to speak and act like one. The tension explodes as insults are thrown back and forth, but Lady Aisha shuts it all down, making it clear she will oversee her son's education from now on, and that no one is allowed to interfere again. She also warns her directly, reminding her that the estate does not belong to her, and if she goes too far, she will fall hard. The Countess threatens that Hades will not forgive this, but Lady Aisha turns away without fear, saying even the Duke seemed tired of her already. Then she adds something even sharper, that she will make up for the painful childhood of both her husband and son, and no one will stand in her way. Before leaving, she throws one last warning, telling her to take her henchmen and stop the eavesdropping, exposing everything in a single line. The Countess is left stunned, and just as Lady Aisha reaches the door, she drops the final blow, saying she has no intention of forgiving what was done to Abel, and when she becomes officially Duchess, the Countess will face consequences too. She walks out, but once outside, the fire in her chest fades just slightly into something heavier, a quiet unease settling in her mind as she wonders why, even after doing all that, her heart still does not feel at peace. Lady Aisha is still stuck in the heavy weight of everything that just happened. The Countess, Abel, all of it keeps spinning in her mind. Then suddenly a memory hits her, Abel smiling so softly, saying that being with her feels nice, telling her not to worry because he is not tired at all. That simple warmth cuts through her like something painful and sweet at the same time. Before she even realizes it, she sinks down onto the floor, her strength gone. It has been a long time since I got angry like that. I'm so stupid for not noticing. I'm sorry. The words slip out as tears finally break free. And just like that, Lady Aisha starts crying. At that moment, Anne walks in and freezes at the sight. "My lady!" Her voice bursts out in shock as she rushes closer. Instantly, she assumes the worst, thinking the Countess must have said something cruel again. That crazy old lady? Treating someone from a respectable house like this? It's unbearable. Anne is ready to explode with anger, but Lady Aisha quickly wipes her eyes and stops her. It wasn't that. In fact, I was the one who spoke rudely. That simple truth changes everything, but the tears still won't stop. Anne pauses, still protective, still burning with frustration, even threatening to grab the Countess and face the punishment later if needed. But Lady Aisha insists again, voice shaking, that this isn't why she is crying. The Countess didn't even have a proper response. That isn't it at all. Slowly, Anne's anger softens into worry. Then what is it? She asks gently, urging her not to carry everything alone. And in that fragile silence, Lady Aisha finally speaks about what is really breaking her. I don't think I deserve someone as noble as Abel. He might be disgusted if he knew I'm like this. The thought hurts more than anything else. But Anne immediately shakes her head. After everything she has seen of Abel, there is no way she can agree with that. That child is pure, truly pure. No one could be better. Of course she understands why Lady Aisha cares about him so much. In her eyes, Abel is simply the best. Still, the tears don't stop. Lady Aisha is reminded again of everything she heard, everything about Abel's lonely and painful past in the story. Anne tries to lift the mood, talking about finishing the embroidery handkerchief and even bringing up the idea of giving Abel his gift. But instead of easing her heart, it only makes it heavier. Because of that, Lady Aisha's thoughts sink even deeper. If only I had been there. If only I had more time. I could have given him love, care, anything. That regret crashes down again, and she breaks into tears once more. Anne panics a little, asking why she is crying again, half frustrated and half worried. And finally, unable to watch her mistress suffer alone, she makes a simple suggestion. Instead of crying here, why not go to Abel? Go and stay with him. Maybe even give him a hug. Don't stay like this. That idea lands quietly but strongly. For a moment, Lady Aisha hesitates, still unsure, still overwhelmed. But Anne nods firmly, encouraging her. And just like that, something inside her shifts. Slowly, she agrees. Lady Aisha rushes into Abel's room, her voice calling out for him, but the room is quiet. A bad feeling builds in her chest as she steps closer, pulling back the blanket he is covered with. And the moment she sees his feet, everything inside her just breaks. There are clear marks on them, and blood is dripping onto the bed. It is too much to take in at once. Her strength gives out, and tears spill down before she can even stop them. She shakes, whispering that this is really crazy, before rushing to grab a first aid kit. With trembling hands and tears still falling, she treats his wounds, carefully wrapping bandages around his feet while apologizing again and again, blaming herself for making things worse without even knowing he was hurt. In her mind flashes Abel once saying he felt lonely, and that memory cuts even deeper. Even as she tries to steady herself, her voice breaks as she begs him not to get used to loneliness, not to be kind to those who hate him, because he is the loveliest child in the world. She tells him, even if he gets angry, even if he hates her, she will still be on his side, so he should cry, smile, shout, and complain freely, because he is just a child and deserves love. By the time she finishes, she gently places a hand on him, wipes her tears, and walks out of the room, leaving behind words filled with warmth he was never meant to hear alone. But Abel hears everything. The moment she leaves, he lies there, crying and smiling at the same time, finally feeling something he has never truly had before, being loved. The next day, the Duke sits in his office, flipping through papers and stopping at one in particular, calling it practically hearsay. The document speaks about the Escliffes, a family that has always tried to preserve the attribute of light in their bloodline through every generation, refusing marriages that would weaken it. It explains that in mixed unions, children usually inherit only the dominant attribute, so the Escliffes worked hard to keep theirs pure, only accepting those with the same power. And all of this, despite the attribute becoming almost useless due to their lack of mana, was kept alive because of a woman from centuries ago, Abella Escliffe, tied to a prophecy. She was once praised as being touched by heaven, not only able to use her power from birth, but also gifted with foresight. Before her death, she left behind a prophecy, saying she would return as the Saint of Escliffe once more, a martyr who would save the world in the face of destruction. The Duke sits alone with his book, eyes scanning the pages, but his thoughts drift far away. The idea of a family clinging so tightly to a 500-year-old promise feels almost unbelievable to him. In his mind, he wonders if they are living under a rock. As long as the continent does not sink into the ocean, the empire will still survive for hundreds of years. So why hold on so desperately to something so old? But then another thought slips in. The strange story of that woman whose eyes opened right before her coffin was sealed, who barely escaped being buried alive. A family like that? Truly strange. He presses his hand to his head, trying to make sense of it all. Before he can think further, the door suddenly bursts open. The Countess storms in, already shouting before even stopping properly. The air turns heavy in an instant. She is furious, demanding to know what kind of woman he has brought into the house, calling Aisha a bitch without holding back. The Duke's eyes sharpen immediately. Surely she cannot be speaking about Aisha like that. But the Countess confirms it, louder and more hateful than before, insisting she is right and ordering him to throw Aisha out at once. The Duke finally snaps, telling her she must be crazy and ordering her to leave, but she refuses and steps closer, voice still burning with rage. She goes on about what Aisha said in her room yesterday, how she dared to tell her not to interfere with the Louvremont family, how she even threatened her with punishment and claimed she would one day become Duchess. The Countess paints her as nothing but a dangerous snake, demanding she be thrown out immediately. But as the words pile up, the Duke's expression darkens, his fist tightening slowly. Then, cold and sharp, he cuts through everything and asks one question that changes the air completely. "Agatha, did you hit my son too?" That morning in the dining room feels strangely warm, almost peaceful. Lady Aisha is quietly eating when Abel walks in, all dressed up neatly, even wearing a tie. The moment she sees him, she nearly chokes in surprise, coughing hard as food goes the wrong way. Panic instantly hits Abel, and he rushes closer, worried if she is all right. She quickly waves it off, wiping her mouth and insisting she is fine, but her eyes are already locked on him in confusion. Because now he is wearing shoes, and that thought alone makes her heart tighten. In her mind, she wonders if his injuries have even healed enough for him to walk like this. But Abel, looking up at her with soft hesitation, asks if they can eat together. That small, careful request makes her freeze for a second before she immediately agrees, telling him yes, of course, and to be careful as he climbs up to sit. As he settles down, he turns to her again, almost shy, asking if he can eat like this every day. And when she says yes without hesitation, his eyes brighten. He even goes further, asking if they can have snacks later in her room too. Again, she agrees easily, like it is the most natural thing in the world. Then his voice softens, trembling a little as he asks something even more precious, once his feet heal. Can they go walking every day? That single question breaks something inside her. Tears well up before she can stop them, and before she knows it, she is crying too, promising him they can do anything he wants, anything at all. Abel immediately leans in and hugs her tightly, both of them smiling through tears, holding on to each other like they have found something they both lost long ago. And in that moment, she gently reminds him not to cry, calling him cute even when he cries. Abel only holds her closer, saying even her crying face is pretty, and the warmth between them feels almost unreal. But then her voice turns serious. From now on, he must tell her if he is sick, if he is hurt, if anything happens at all, no matter who it is. And the Countess? She assures him she already made sure that woman will never hurt him again. Abel is stunned, unsure what that even means, and when he asks if the Duke would allow that kind of punishment, she answers a hesitant, probably, already doubting herself. In her mind, fear creeps in. Did she go too far? Will she be thrown out for this? The thought of being separated from Abel makes her chest tighten painfully, and just as her anxiety grows heavier, she leans toward him and gently touches him again, trying to reassure both of them that everything is fine. But before the fear can fully settle, the door suddenly bursts open. The Duke rushes in, moves straight to Abel, and without a word removes his shoe. Before anyone can react, his emotionless gaze sharpens, and magic begins to form in his hand. Lady Aisha panics and shouts for him to stop unless absolutely necessary, but he doesn't listen. Power activates instantly, and in that moment, the truth of absorption becomes clear. Any physical injury can be transferred through core stone ability. And just like that, Hades takes Abel's wounds onto himself. It is not healing that removes pain, but transfer. A heavy silence fills the room as Lady Aisha realizes what just happened. It is not dangerous this time, not serious, but still, a cold dread crawls up her spine. Because this scene is familiar, too familiar. In the original story, this ability is exactly what led to Hades' downfall, as he once absorbed not just wounds, but Abel's deeper pain and broken spirit, and lost his life soon after. The spell settles, and in the quiet that follows, Abel looks up at his father, calling out softly, but the Duke doesn't answer. Instead, he simply lifts the boy into his arms and holds him close, as if checking he is really okay. While doing so, his eyes briefly move toward Lady Aisha, standing nearby. That small glance is enough to make her heart tighten. In her mind, she wonders if this is because of what happened yesterday. Maybe he already knows. Maybe she needs to explain herself. But before her thoughts can spiral further, the Duke finally speaks. Aisha. She straightens immediately. My lord. Then comes something she did not expect at all. You did well, and thank you. Lady Aisha freezes for a moment. What? Those words don't feel real at first. But he continues, calm and steady, saying that if it weren't for her, he wouldn't have known Abel was hurt. She never said anything to make him worry, and for that, he is grateful that she is here. Her chest tightens again, but this time for a different reason. She quickly tries to explain herself, bringing up the Countess, admitting she went to her room yesterday and spoke rudely. She apologizes, saying she may have gone too far. But the Duke simply cuts through her worry. He already knows. And more than that, he reminds her of what he said before, that she should act out sometimes. Lady Aisha is left stunned again, but a small, relieved smile appears. Yes, he really did say that. Still, she admits there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, that she got too angry. But the Duke, still holding Abel, looks at her with a calm certainty and says that if someone goes against what she values, she has every right to push back. She has that right. Then he stretches out his hand. Lady Aisha hesitates for a moment, almost unsure if this is real, but slowly she places her hand in his. I am a man of my words. The moment he says it, he gently kisses her hand, making her freeze completely. And then comes the final reassurance. If she wants to do anything her heart desires for him and Abel, he will make sure she becomes someone who can do it freely. And just like that, something shifts inside her. With her hand still in his, Lady Aisha feels it clearly. This strange, steady warmth. For the first time, it almost feels possible. Like she could stand there with them, this man and his son, not as an outsider, but as part of something real. Something like a family. Lady Aisha is in Abel's room, sitting quietly on the bed when he walks out in his pajamas, all neat and proud of himself. He even announces that he cleaned up properly, like he wants her approval. But the moment she sees him, something strange happens in her chest. A sharp, sudden pain hits her, and she freezes. Abel panics instantly and rushes over, asking if she is unwell, if something hurts, what is wrong. In a daze, she only manages to hold her chest and say it is her heart. That word alone sends him into full panic. He is completely shocked, asking how her heart could suddenly hurt, telling her to wait there while he goes to call the doctor and even Booth's father right away. But before he can run off, she suddenly lifts her head, smiling through it all, and says the truth so casually that it completely breaks his panic. Her heart simply skipped a beat because he is too cute. Abel goes silent. For a moment, he just stares, completely speechless, trying to process what he just heard. Then he finally reacts, flustered, asking what that even means and why she would say something like that when she scared him so much. Lady Aisha only laughs softly, apologizing, asking if he really got that shocked. But she admits it again, more gently this time. Her heart truly did skip a beat because of him. Abel, still recovering, tells her to stop joking like that. He was really scared. But despite his words, he pulls her into a hug, holding on tightly and asking her not to get sick, telling her she has to stay with him for a very long time. The warmth of that hug settles the moment, and Lady Aisha simply places a hand on his back, answering softly that she will, and that he should stay with her too. After leaving the dining hall earlier, the two of them had already spent a peaceful day together, walking around and eating snacks alone, just the two of them. And during that time, Abel had hesitated before sharing a wish with her. He wanted something simple, something innocent. And Lady Aisha had already told him not to be shy and to just ask, assuring him she would not be angry. Abel, quickly, had insisted he was grateful she agreed, even if it might feel like a bother. And in her mind, she already understands it clearly. His wish is to sleep beside her. Still, she finds herself thinking how he does not need to carry that alone. If he felt lonely, he could have asked the Duke instead. But when she suggests it, Abel only explains that his father is very busy, then trails off, stopping himself before saying more. Night falls quickly after that. Lady Aisha simply looks at him and decides it is time to sleep. She tells him she will keep holding his hand even after he falls asleep. Abel, instantly brightening, asks if it is really okay. When she confirms it, he happily climbs to the other side of the bed, settles in, and closes his eyes with a soft, peaceful smile, finally resting, safe and content. The room is quiet, almost peaceful, as Abel lies down, but then a small memory hits him. Lady Aisha, pretending earlier that she had a heart problem, only to reveal it was just because of him. That thought makes his eyes open again, suddenly alert, just as she is gently trying to cover him properly with the blanket. She notices the change in his face and tilts her head slightly, asking why he is making that expression. Then her eyes follow his gaze, and Abel finally speaks, pointing out the thing on her wrist. He tells her she really needs to hide it properly when she goes outside. The reminder is soft but serious. Lady Aisha immediately agrees, and even adds that he must not tell anyone either. They both silently agree to keep it between them, and she promises she will remember. But Abel sits up again as if something is still on his mind. And then comes something unexpected. He says that since she told him her secret, he wants to tell her his too. That instantly pulls her attention. In her mind, there is no doubt about what it could be. Of course, it must be his core jewel. That is the only secret a child like him could possibly have. Just like her inability to hide her own core jewel, Abel is likely the special one in the story, the future symbol of the kingdom. That is how novels usually work. Still, she quietly judges herself again, thinking she is nothing special at all, just incompetent in comparison. Then Abel's voice breaks her thoughts. The Duke already told him to keep his secret safe, so she quickly responds, asking if it is really okay to share something like that. Wouldn't he get in trouble with his father? But Abel simply looks at her and says she is not just anyone. That one line hits differently. It leaves her briefly flustered, almost touched, and she can't help but think how dangerously trusting he is. How cute, how honest, but also how risky. In her mind, she already remembers how children like him in the story were backstabbed more than once. At least 3 times. She can't let that happen again. Not to him. So she gently places her hand over his and thanks him for trusting her, but firmly tells him no. There are too many dangerous people in the world, and secrets like that cannot be shared so easily. Abel tries to argue, saying she wouldn't do anything bad anyway, but she raises a finger and stops him softly. Of course she wouldn't. But still, he must wait. If he really wants to tell her, then wait until they are closer, maybe a year from now, on his next birthday. By then, it won't be so risky anymore. Abel still hesitates, saying he already told her a secret, but she quickly adds another condition. He should only tell her after getting permission from the Duke. Only then will she listen. He finally agrees. And right at that exact moment, the door opens. The Duke walks in. He stops, looks at the two of them, and simply asks what is going on, leaving the entire room frozen in confusion. Just when everything seems calm, the door suddenly opens and the Duke walks into Abel's room. The moment he steps inside, he finds Lady Aisha and Abel sitting together on the bed. Naturally, he stops and asks the question on his mind. What is this? Honestly, that is exactly what Lady Aisha wants to know too. She is suddenly reminded that she is currently sitting on Abel's bed while the Duke is standing there staring at them. Meanwhile, Abel looks completely relaxed. Instead of panicking, he simply smiles and says it is nothing, even letting out a small chuckle. Immediately, warning bells start ringing inside Lady Aisha's head. Something feels strange. Something is definitely fishy. Plot recovery. That has to be it. This is his scheme. The more she thinks about it, the more convinced she becomes. Unfortunately, there is one problem. She is still nowhere near comfortable enough to start acting all lovey-dovey with Hades. Meanwhile, the Duke studies the scene before placing a hand against his forehead. Then, as if he has suddenly solved a great mystery, he sighs and says, "No wonder." Apparently, Abel has never said anything like this before. Then he reaches a conclusion that nearly makes Lady Aisha lose her mind. If she really wanted to be with him, she could have simply told him herself. The moment those words leave his mouth, she immediately tries to correct him. That is not what happened, sir. Unfortunately, this man has already decided what the truth is. Of course it is, according to him. Before she can argue any further, he casually walks over to the bed and tells Abel to lie down because a good boy should sleep early and wake up early. At that point, Lady Aisha gives up. There is no point fighting anymore. She cannot ruin Abel's mood. Fine. As long as Abel is happy, she can survive one more misunderstanding from this narcissistic Duke. And just like that, the situation somehow becomes even more unbelievable. The 3 of them end up lying on the same bed, with Abel safely in the middle. For a while, everything is peaceful. Then Abel suddenly looks up and asks a question that catches both adults completely off guard. When Father and Lady Ascliffe are married, what should I call the lady? The question instantly changes the atmosphere. Both adults chuckle softly, and Lady Aisha turns toward him with a smile. Honestly, she wonders about that too. What should he call her? She thinks for a moment before giving the answer that comes straight from her heart. Wouldn't you have to call me Mom? I would like it if you called me that. The moment those words reach him, Abel's face lights up with happiness. Without hesitation, he smiles and agrees. Yes, he would like that too. And just like that, something warm settles over the room. For Lady Aisha, it is a simple answer. For Abel, however, it means much more. For perhaps the first time, the idea of having a real mother feels close enough to touch. That thought alone makes him happier than anything. The room grows quiet again as everyone settles down. No arguments, no misunderstandings, and no drama for the moment. Just a small family sharing a peaceful moment together. For Lady Aisha, seeing Abel smile like this makes every awkward misunderstanding worth enduring. For Abel, the future suddenly feels brighter than ever before. And for the Duke, well, he still seems completely convinced that Lady Aisha wanted to spend time with him all along. Honestly, some things never change. As the three of them lie together on the bed, Abel suddenly turns toward his father with a curious look and asks the question that has been sitting in his heart all this time. "Father, when will the wedding be?" Surprisingly, the Duke answers with a smile. Tomorrow, his advisors are scheduled to visit the manor, so he will discuss it with them. As soon as the marriage documents sent to the Ascliffe family are returned, they will set a date. Once the preparations are complete, the wedding will happen as quickly as possible. Hearing that, Lady Aisha lets out a small laugh before asking something that has been bothering her. What about the advisors? Won't there be problems? After all, Count Gasfield clearly does not like her. However, the Duke looks completely unconcerned. Why worry about something like that? According to him, the meeting is only a formality. If he wants her to become his wife, who exactly has the right to object? That confidence leaves no room for argument. Even Abel quickly joins in, telling her not to worry about things like that. Honestly, when both father and son are on the same side, Lady Aisha does not stand much of a chance. Eventually, she changes the subject and tells Abel it is getting late and that he should go to sleep. But before closing his eyes, the little boy has one more important question. Is father going back to his room after I fall asleep? The answer comes immediately. No. Then Abel turns toward Lady Aisha. What about the lady? Once again, the answer is no. She will stay too. That response seems to satisfy him completely. Finally, the room grows quiet. The worries disappear, the conversations fade away, and before long, everyone drifts off to sleep. For a brief moment, it feels like a real family sharing a peaceful night together, something Abel has probably wished for far longer than anyone realizes. Meanwhile, as she sleeps, Lady Aisha finds herself inside a dream. But this is no ordinary dream. Standing before her is Abel, except he is no longer a child. He has grown up. The moment he turns around and calls her mom, her heart nearly stops. Then, before she can even process what is happening, he runs toward her. She instinctively touches her chest, overwhelmed by the sight before her, and he gently takes her hand. What follows hits her right in the heart. "Thank you for raising me. I wouldn't have made it this far without you." Hearing those words, she can barely contain her emotions. Abel. That is all she can manage before embracing him. In her mind, she cannot help admiring how handsome he has become. He looks exactly like the future she always imagined for him. Then, while still holding her, he tells her something that completely melts her heart. He loves her more than anyone else in the world, even more than Deborah. At that point, our girl is practically finished. She cannot believe what she is hearing. Even more shocking is the realization that the tiny child who once fit perfectly in her arms has become a grown man with shoulders and a chest so broad that she compares them to the Pacific Ocean. However, before she can enjoy the moment any longer, she starts hearing her name from far away. Aisha. The voice grows clearer. Then comes a familiar line full of confidence. Apparently, his overflowing charm is to blame, but a woman like her is still troublesome. The moment those words reach her ears, her eyes snap open. Instantly, she realizes she has been dreaming about Abel's future. Even worse, she remembers that they are all still sharing the same bed. Her eyes widen in shock. Right in front of her is the Duke himself. Hades is looking directly at her, wearing a smile. Then, as though nothing unusual has happened at all, he calmly asks if she is awake now. Meanwhile, Lady Aisha remains completely frozen, still trying to recover from one of the most emotional and unexpected dreams she has ever had. The moment Lady Aisha opens her eyes, she finds the Duke lying right there, looking at her. Calmly, he asks if she is finally awake. But the second she notices just how close he is, she lets out a loud scream that nearly shakes the room. The poor man immediately covers his ears and waits for the storm to pass. Then, with complete confusion, he asks why she is acting so surprised. Still trying to calm her racing heart, Aisha places a hand on her chest and quickly defends herself. She is not acting at all. She is genuinely shocked. But instead of believing her, the Duke smirks and jokes that if anyone saw this scene, they would think he was the victim. At this point, he even teases that she could become an actress in the capital. Now our girl is completely lost. Did she really do something while asleep? Naturally, she demands an explanation. That is when he casually points out that she had been pretending so well that it looked like she had not even woken up yet. Aisha immediately argues back. She really has just woken up. Unfortunately, the Duke answers with the kind of response that clearly says he does not believe a single word. Determined to clear her name, she insists that her sleeping habits are not normally this bad. She was dreaming, she got confused, and that must be what happened. However, the Duke only laughs and reminds her that she somehow ended up crawling all over him because she could not tell the difference between a dream and reality. Ouch. Aisha quickly points out that saying she crawled all over him sounds much worse than it actually was, especially since she did not do it on purpose. Then she suddenly remembers something else and questions why Abel disappeared the moment he left the room, almost as if he had been waiting for an opportunity. Curious, she asks where he went. As if perfectly on cue, Abel walks back in carrying water. He cheerfully explains that he thought she would be thirsty after waking up. Watching him place the water jar down, Aisha cannot help thinking that this is exactly the kind of thing the maid should be doing. Surprisingly, the Duke has the exact same thought. He immediately asks Abel why he went himself instead of calling the maids. For once, Aisha realizes they are both thinking the same thing. But Abel simply climbs onto the bed and explains that he wanted to bring it personally. Meanwhile, Aisha cannot resist pointing out that the Duke could have stopped him before he left. Unfortunately for her, that only gives him another chance to tease her. He calmly reminds her that he had been asleep and only woke up because someone started trying to crawl into his shirt without the slightest bit of embarrassment. Just like that, all her confidence disappears again. Looking away, she apologizes and admits she unknowingly made him uncomfortable. Yet his answer catches her off guard. He was not uncomfortable at all. In fact, he casually admits that he was not even surprised she would do something like that. The second those words leave his mouth, Aisha is left completely speechless. Before she can even demand an explanation, he raises a hand and shuts the conversation down, explaining that he has to meet with his advisors and cannot stay. He even reveals that the only reason he woke her up was because he was busy and needed to leave. But just when it seems the awkward morning is finally over, he turns back at the door and delivers one last line that leaves her stunned. It is a pity they cannot stay together longer this time, but there will definitely be a next time. And just like that, he leaves her alone with those words echoing in her head. At this point, poor Aisha honestly does not even know what to think anymore. As soon as the Duke leaves the room, something unexpected happens. Instead of moving on with his day, his mind keeps returning to what happened on that bed. Standing behind the door, he cannot stop thinking about Lady Aisha crawling all over him in her sleep. The memory keeps replaying again and again, and the more he thinks about it, the more confused he becomes. What is this woman doing? Is she not embarrassed? Honestly, this man is supposed to be heading to an important meeting, yet all he can think about is Aisha. Unfortunately for him, the situation does not improve. Even after sitting down with his advisors, those same thoughts continue to distract him. While everyone else is focused on serious matters, the Duke is clearly somewhere else entirely. Before long, Count Gasfell notices it and calls out to him. The Duke immediately snaps back to reality and tries to regain his focus, lifting the document in front of him as if nothing happened. However, his distraction is already obvious to everyone in the room. One of the advisors points out that he does not seem able to concentrate today. Trying to brush it aside, the Duke simply explains that he has a few things on his mind. The meeting then moves forward as Count Gasfell reminds him of their earlier discussion. Whatever decision the Duke makes, they are prepared to support him completely. They will help make all the preparations for the wedding and protect the honor of the Louvermont Duchy once they receive a response from the Ascliffe family. However, there is one condition. Everything depends on whether the Ascliffe family agrees to the requirements being placed before them. Hearing this, the Duke seems pleased that he does not need to waste time arguing with his advisors and immediately asks what those requirements are. Count Gasfell explains that the key issue is the unification with the duchy. Since many people are watching this marriage closely, it is important for the Ascliffe family to prove their value to the Louvermont Duchy. Sitting alongside him are the other two advisors, Count Romardio Garin and Count Dane Rasley. Wanting a clear answer, the Duke turns to them and asks what decision they have reached, and then comes the bombshell. According to the advisors, if this marriage is going to happen, the Ascliffe Duchy must provide a dowry of 8 billion Norts. The moment those words leave their mouths, the Duke is completely stunned. For a second, he can hardly believe what he just heard. Then, unable to hide his shock, he asks the three men if they are joking with him. The moment the Duke questions the demand, Count Gasfell looks genuinely shocked. To him, there is nothing strange about it at all. He quickly insists that they are simply doing their job seriously. But the Duke is not fooled. Deep down, he can already see what is happening. From the very beginning, these men have been looking for a way to stop this marriage. Even so, he cannot completely ignore their reasoning. If he were to marry Aisha from the small Ascliffe Duchy, without any conditions in place, she could easily end up being looked down on after entering the main duchy. Meanwhile, Count Gasfel continues his argument. This is the marriage of the main duchy, and naturally the entire city will be watching. According to him, even if the bride's family does not stand on equal ground with the Louvermont duchy, they should at least prove they can come close to that level. Then comes the final jab. It seems the Ascliffe family simply does not have that kind of money to spare. Hearing that, the Duke immediately understands the real meaning behind those words. For someone who knows exactly how much power and wealth the Ascliffe family has, there is no way this condition was made to be accepted. It is a demand designed to force them into refusing. Even so, he calmly responds that losing a major asset would probably be enough, but somehow the Ascliffe family should still be able to gather 8 billion Norts. Then he makes his position clear. He will personally deliver the advisor's requirements to the Ascliffe family. With that, the decision is made. 8 billion Norts will be the required dowry, and the marriage discussion comes to an end. However, before leaving, the Duke drops a warning that instantly changes the mood in the room. If anything changes, or if his future wife is mistreated after paying such a massive amount to enter the duchy, the people sitting there will be the ones held responsible. Rising to his feet, he makes sure every single one of them understands exactly what he means. Meanwhile, back in his office, the atmosphere is completely different. Lady Aisha sits with the Duke and immediately notices that something feels off. Naturally, the first thing that comes to her mind is the marriage discussion. Did they reject it? The Duke quickly shuts down that fear, reminding her that he already told her something like that would never happen. Still, she can tell he is troubled. His hand rests against his head and he looks unusually restless. When she asks what is wrong, he simply laughs and admits that he needs a moment because he is trying to figure out how to explain something. At this point, our girl is probably wondering why she was even called there if he was just going to sit and think. Then, after a brief silence, she suddenly asks a completely unexpected question. Are his feet all right? The Duke is immediately confused. What does that have to do with anything? But Aisha stays serious. She reminds him about Abel. He took away the boy's pain by using his core stone and absorbed the wounds himself instead. Surely that must have affected him. To her surprise, the Duke looks genuinely amazed that she even knows such a thing is possible. That only earns him an offended response. Why is he treating her like an idiot? His answer, however, is surprisingly honest. Someone who cannot even hide her core stone and has no magic should not normally know about abilities like that. Naturally, Aisha keeps the real reason to herself. She knows the basic rules of this world, and none of this is new information to her, but she does not reveal that. Instead, the Duke quickly explains that he never meant to call her stupid. In fact, where else would he find a woman this clever, especially one who can act so well? Knowing very well that her reactions earlier had not been acting at all, Aisha can only smile and brush it off as simple common knowledge. The Duke cannot help smirking when he notices how concerned Lady Aisha is about his condition. Then, almost teasingly, he asks what she would have done if he had really taken Abel's wounds exactly as they were. Was she planning to treat him the same way she treated Abel? Honestly, this man really knows how to make everything about himself. Before Aisha can even react properly, he continues, thanking her for the concern but explaining that her understanding of the situation is slightly wrong. Yes, he absorbed Abel's pain, but that does not mean he absorbed the wounds in the exact same form. In other words, he is completely fine. The common knowledge she is relying on is not entirely correct. Hearing that leaves Aisha deep in thought. After all, this is something she never learned from the novel. The story never showed what happens when someone without purification abilities absorbs another person's wounds. In fact, the Duke is the only person she knows who can even use absorption despite not having purification. Back in the novel, the injuries he took from Abel were internal wounds and emotional damage. There was never any chance to see how physical injuries were transferred. Because of that, there was simply no way for her to know how it worked. Watching her sit there thinking so hard, the Duke points out that she could have just asked him directly if she was that curious. He even wonders if she was able to sleep at all while worrying so much about it. However, Aisha quickly changes the subject and steers the conversation back to the real problem. Rather than thinking alone, wouldn't it be better if both of them worked through the issue together? The Duke finally reveals what happened during the meeting. The advisors have agreed to stop opposing the marriage, but only under one condition. They want an enormous dowry. At first, Aisha actually looks relieved. If money is the problem, then how much could it possibly be? Then comes the number, 8 billion Norts. The Duke immediately follows it up by telling her not to worry. He already has a plan. He intends to use his own private funds, money that even his advisors do not know about. The difficult part will be forging documents to make it appear as though the Ascliffe Duchy provided the dowry themselves. And then, just when he believes he has everything figured out, Aisha casually asks if that is all. The Duke is completely confused. What does she mean, is that all? With a calm smile, she tells him not to worry because she has at least that much money herself. Just like that, the entire conversation comes to a screeching halt. The Duke is stunned. 8 billion Norts is not a small amount that someone casually finds lying around. Naturally, he immediately asks where in the world she got that kind of wealth. Meanwhile, Aisha quietly reflects on the path that brought her here. 3 years have passed since she opened her eyes as Aisha in Crescenta, and 1 year has passed since she started properly following Abel around. And if there is one thing about her that has never changed, it is this. She has always worked hard to earn money for the things she loves. Back in her previous life, she studied and worked for one reason: fangirling. And after arriving in this world, her goal remained exactly the same. She wanted Abel to receive gifts worthy of him, gifts that would never embarrass him. That is why, from the moment she awakened in this world, she spent 2 whole years preparing something very important. Not power, not influence, not status, wealth. After shocking the Duke with the revelation that she can actually afford 8 billion Norts, Lady Aisha casually tries to calm him down. In her mind, the solution is simple. She can just ask Doug for the money, so there is no reason for him to worry. The moment the name Doug leaves her mouth, however, the Duke immediately focuses on it. Doug? Who exactly is that? Aisha looks confused by the question and reminds him that he already knows the person. She is talking about Viscount Heir, the sponsor whose family supports her. That is when the Duke finally remembers. Ah, Viscount Douglas Heir. But instead of looking relieved, his expression changes in a way that instantly catches Aisha's attention. Something is clearly bothering him. When she asks if there is a problem, he points out something that seems to be bothering him a lot more than the money itself. She is calling Douglas by a nickname. Judging by that alone, they must be quite close. And just like that, our girl is completely caught off guard. Close? Her and Doug? The more she listens, the more she realizes that Hades does not seem very pleased about this relationship at all. Honestly, from his point of view, maybe it does look strange. They are about to get married, yet she is talking very comfortably about another man who apparently has enough money to hand over 8 billion Norts without hesitation. The problem is that the Duke has absolutely no idea how funny this situation really is. Because the great Viscount Douglas Heir is actually her. Yes, the mysterious sponsor everyone knows is nothing more than a second identity created by Aisha herself. The name was carefully put together from Doug and Heir. It exists only on paper and nowhere else. Contracts are handled through documents, and whenever meetings cannot be avoided, she hires a substitute. According to her, plenty of people do similar things, so it is not particularly suspicious. Besides, if wealthy merchants and investors discovered they were dealing with a young noblewoman, con artists would gather around her immediately. Even knowing all of that, she still cannot figure out what is going through the Duke's head right now. Unfortunately, her attempt to hide her amusement does not work very well. The Duke notices her smile and immediately asks if she finds this funny. Aisha quickly denies it and tries to smooth things over. She claims she understands why he might think that way, but the relationship between her and Viscount Heir is purely one of sponsor and sponsored. Nothing more. However, the Duke is not convinced so easily. Why would any sponsor casually hand over 8 billion Norts? That goes far beyond the normal limits of such a relationship. In fact, judging by her confidence, it almost sounds as if this sponsor would give her any amount she asked for. Hearing that, Aisha is forced to admit something to herself. He is incredibly sharp. The problem is that she cannot tell him the truth. Trading under a false identity is against the city's laws, and if she wants access to that money, she cannot simply pretend Douglas does not exist. At this point, she feels cornered and decides to gamble on something else entirely. Looking directly at him, she asks whether he is doubting her. If he has already decided not to trust her, then there is nothing she can do. Honestly, she is just throwing words out there and hoping something sticks. Surprisingly, it works. She continues by saying that she understands they have not spent enough time together to build complete trust, but it still hurts a little that he keeps questioning her even after she reassures him. The effect is immediate. The Duke quickly backs down and insists that he is not doubting her at all. If anything, the person he doubts is her sponsor. His concern is whether this mysterious man has hidden intentions toward her. Aisha immediately dismisses the idea and asks if he really believes she is foolish enough to miss something like that. But in the end, the Duke makes up his mind. Rather than involving Douglas Heir, he will handle the matter himself. He tells her not to worry because he will prepare the money. Then, as if putting an end to the entire discussion, he firmly adds that she does not need to call that guy over something this small. Now, to understand just how serious this situation is, you need to remember one thing. 8 billion Norts is not a normal amount of money. We are talking about a fortune so large that someone would need to sell 3 or 4 large manors just to gather that much. Even for the powerful Louvermont family, it is not the kind of money that can simply appear overnight. Because of that, Hades has already started considering a dangerous option. Hidden under an anonymous name is a diamond mine in the central region of Felicay, a mine worth around 10 billion Norts that he has been saving for Abel's future. The problem is that selling it now would create a huge issue. That mine is supposed to become the very opportunity that allows Abel and Deborah to meet in the future. In other words, selling it could change important events completely. Meanwhile, Aisha has no intention of letting that happen. The moment the Duke insists that he will prepare the dowry himself, she immediately speaks up. A marriage is something shared by 2 people, so the preparation should be shared too. She appreciates everything he is trying to do for her, but she cannot keep accepting everything without giving something back. Deep down, she already knows she has enough money to solve this problem herself. More importantly, she does not want the steady flow of Abel's future romance to be ruined because of a diamond mine being sold too early. She refuses to let anything interfere with Abel's future. With that in mind, she stands and firmly asks him to let her handle at least this part. Then, before the discussion can become even more complicated, she decides to leave the room. Unfortunately, her departure only makes things worse inside the Duke's head. Left alone, he starts thinking about everything she said. Why does she not understand that people rarely do things without expecting something in return? In his eyes, there is no way someone would sponsor another person for 3 whole years out of pure kindness. The more he thinks about Douglas Hurain, the more suspicious he becomes. This mysterious man is wealthy enough to hand over 8 billion norts without hesitation. That kind of money does not come from nowhere. Then Aisha's words echo through his mind once again. She would feel burdened if she never did anything in return. The second he remembers that, he reaches a conclusion. Absolutely not. There is no way he can allow her to prepare her dowry using another man's money. That is completely unacceptable. No matter what happens, he will handle the 8 billion norts himself. If necessary, he will sell the diamond mine. Decision made, he immediately heads out. However, the moment he steps through the door, Abel appears and cheerfully greets him. The Duke quickly explains that he is busy, and asks the boy to save whatever he wants to say for later. But then Abel casually mentions something that stops him in his tracks. Was he looking for Lady Escliffe? Because she is not in the manor anymore. Instantly, Hades' attention snaps toward him. Not in the manor? Then where did she go? Abel admits that he does not know. She visited his room briefly after getting ready and told him she had somewhere important to be. Hearing that, the Duke immediately decides he needs to go after her and promises he will return soon. But before he can leave, something else catches his eye. In Abel's hands is a handkerchief with embroidery that looks strangely familiar. The Duke stares at it and asks where it came from because it looks exactly like his. Proudly, Abel explains that Lady Escliffe gave it to him as a gift before leaving. According to her, she embroidered it herself. In fact, he had been on his way to show it to his father because she seemed to have put a great deal of effort into making it. Abel happily adds that she mentioned having a difficult time because she lost the one she was originally making. And just like that, the Duke freezes. The shock hits him immediately as those words sink in. The Duke stands there in shock, staring at the handkerchief in Abel's hands. Then, without warning, he takes it. The reaction is immediate. Abel practically throws himself forward, desperately trying to grab it back. He keeps insisting that his father return it, refusing to let the matter go. Meanwhile, the Duke calmly tells him to wait because he only wants to look at it for a moment. Again and again, he repeats that he is not taking it away, he just wants to examine it. As he studies the embroidery, his mind immediately drifts to the handkerchief he has in his own room. The resemblance is impossible to ignore. Eventually, after enduring enough of Abel's protests, he hands it back. Honestly, what is the problem with simply looking at it for a second? It is not as if it will suddenly fall apart. But Abel is completely serious. Clutching the handkerchief protectively, he explains that it could get dirty or wrinkled if someone grips it too tightly. Hearing that, the Duke cannot help letting out a small laugh. Looking at the boy's face, he notices something amusing. Abel is clearly pouting. Of course, the child immediately denies it. The Duke bends down and takes a closer look, only to confidently point out that yes, he absolutely is pouting. Then he asks the real question. Does he like the gift that much? This time, Abel answers without hesitation. Yes, he does. Naturally, that makes the Duke curious. Did Lady Aisha say anything else when she gave it to him? After confirming that he is talking about her, Abel begins to explain. He had asked her something that clearly weighed heavily on his heart. Why does she go so far out of her way to treat him so well? The Duke is immediately interested and asks what her answer was. And honestly, what comes next hits harder than anyone expects. According to Aisha, hearing that question actually made her a little sad. To her, it sounded as though Abel believed he was not worthy of kindness. Then she told him exactly how she saw him. A cute, sweet, adorable child. Someone so lovable that treating him well simply made her happy. As Abel repeats those words, his emotions start to show. He explains that she said she cared for him because he is a sweet and lovable child. And for the first time in his life, someone other than his father has said something like that to him. The moment those words leave his mouth, his eyes begin to fill with tears. Seeing that, the Duke gently reassures him that everything she said is true. But Abel quietly shakes his head. He already knows that. What matters to him is something else. Deep down, he feels that he does not deserve such affection, especially from someone who only came to the manor because she likes his father. And just like that, the Duke is left completely speechless. Yet Abel continues. No matter what, he is grateful. If not for his father, Lady Aisha would never have entered their lives. Hearing that, the Duke can only agree. Yes, that is true. After wiping his face, Abel looks up and makes one final request. Since Lady Aisha likes his father so much, he must treat her well. In fact, it is perfectly fine if he treats her even better than he treats him. And no matter what happens, he promises he will never be sad about it. The moment those words leave the boy's mouth, the scene becomes far more emotional than anyone could have expected from a simple handkerchief. After hearing Abel's heartfelt words, the Duke reaches out and holds his son's hand. For a moment, it almost seems like he is about to say something important. He starts with a simple request, telling Abel to make sure she does not run away. It sounds as though he is about to continue, perhaps mentioning that Lady Aisha had asked something of him. However, before he can finish, Abel quickly objects. That is not what he meant at all. The Duke simply gives up on explaining further. All right, I got it. With that, he gently pats Abel on the head and walks away. Meanwhile, the weather outside takes a dramatic turn. Rain pours down heavily, thunder rolls through the sky, and flashes of lightning make the storm feel even more intense. In the middle of all that rain, Lady Aisha finally returns. The moment she steps inside, Anne rushes over in concern. Her clothes are completely soaked, and Anne immediately offers to prepare a bath. But instead of thinking about herself, Aisha points out that Anne got caught in the rain just as much as she did. Why not wash up first? Then, almost casually, she even suggests that they bathe together since it has been a while. Anne considers it for a moment, but reminds her that the water will take time to heat up. For now, it would be better for her to head inside and get settled. Aisha agrees without much thought. As she walks toward her room, she cannot help feeling satisfied. Honestly, what is a little rain compared to what she accomplished today? She successfully secured 8 billion norts. Just thinking about it leaves her feeling refreshed. However, the moment she opens the door, that good mood vanishes. The room is strangely dark. Something feels off immediately. Then she notices a figure sitting inside. The shock hits her so hard that she practically jumps out of her skin. A loud scream escapes before she can stop it. For a second, she genuinely feels as though her heart is about to stop. Who on earth is sitting in her room like that? Then she finally recognizes him. It is the Duke. Instantly calming down, she addresses him respectfully. But instead of explaining why he is there, he goes straight to the point. Where did she go? Confused, Aisha reminds him that she already told him. She went to contact the Baron because she intended to prepare the dowry herself. The Duke immediately pushes back. Had he not already told her not to do that? Unfortunately for him, Aisha is just as stubborn. Had she not already explained that she does not want to remain indebted to him? And just like that, the tension in the room rises again. Quietly, the Duke slips a hand into his pocket and tells her to sit down because they need to talk. Then, before saying anything else, he takes something out and places it on the table between them. The handkerchief. The very same handkerchief that has already caused far more trouble than anyone ever expected. The moment the Duke places the handkerchief on the table, Lady Aisha immediately recognizes it. In an instant, she realizes it is the handkerchief she gave Abel before leaving that morning. However, before she can even say anything, the Duke calmly corrects her. No, it is not the one she gave Abel. Confused, she asks what he means. That is when he reveals something completely unexpected. This handkerchief is the one she dropped after their very first meeting when she arrived at the duchy. Suddenly, everything clicks into place for Aisha. So that is where it went. All this time, he had been keeping it. Unfortunately, things only get more dangerous from there. The Duke explains that Abel told him today that the handkerchief was originally made for him. Aisha can only confirm it. Then, the Duke starts connecting one clue after another. She began making it before she even came to the duchy. The holy sword she sent also ended up with Abel. At first, he assumed she sent it to the boy because delivering such a valuable item directly to him would have looked suspicious. Then there was the anonymous letter. Yes, he reread that too. And now, to Aisha's absolute horror, he starts quoting parts of it. My young master is so cute, lovable, dashing, and on and on. The second those words leave his mouth, Aisha feels her soul trying to leave her body. That letter was packed with embarrassing lines exactly like those. At this point, sweat is practically pouring from her. Honestly, things have never looked worse. Feeling completely cornered, she awkwardly lowers herself into the chair beside him. Her mind immediately jumps to the worst possible outcome. If anyone else discovered all of this, they would probably think she was some kind of suspicious person obsessed with a child. In her eyes, that would be an absolute disaster. Meanwhile, the Duke simply smiles and admits that he cannot understand it. The lengths she has gone to for his son leave him completely speechless. Hearing that only makes Aisha panic even more. This is exactly why she worked so hard to appear normal. There is no way he could possibly understand that all of her actions come from her devoted admiration for Abel. Realizing she desperately needs an explanation, she quickly asks him to hear her out. He may not believe her, but she truly has no hidden motives. Everything she has done has been sincere. And then, surprisingly, the Duke immediately says that he already knows. Aisha freezes. He knows? He even asks whether she really thinks he is such a fool that he cannot tell after watching her for days. At that moment, she begins to wonder if he somehow understands her completely. Could it be that he actually recognizes her pure and innocent admiration for Abel? The Duke continues, explaining that he knows her feelings are sincere and completely free of bad intentions. Hearing that, Aisha finally relaxes and thanks him for understanding. Unfortunately, that relief lasts only a few seconds. The Duke suddenly asks a question that catches her completely off guard. How long has it been? Confused, she asks what he means. He repeats himself. How long has she had those feelings? Now, from Aisha's perspective, the answer is obvious. She started liking Abel after finishing the novel, so she confidently answers that it has been 5 years. The reaction is immediate. The Duke practically shouts the number back at her in disbelief. 5 years? She calmly confirms it. Meanwhile, Aisha assumes he is simply shocked because he cannot understand someone being this dedicated for so long. But the Duke is thinking about something entirely different. For the first time, he seriously reflects on the situation. Up until now, he never questioned it because he believed Aisha liked him. Yet when he looks at himself honestly, he struggles to understand why. Aside from his title, what exactly is attractive about him? On top of that, he has openly declared that his title will eventually go to his illegitimate son, Abel. Then another uncomfortable realization hits him. Earlier, he showed obvious displeasure over a sponsor he had never even met. Looking back on it now, he feels embarrassed. If Aisha's feelings have truly lasted 5 years and are this sincere, then perhaps he has judged her unfairly. At that moment, the Duke quietly comes to a conclusion that leaves him feeling strangely uneasy. It seems that, somehow, he is the one who owes her. After sitting there and thinking through everything, the Duke finally looks at Lady Aisha and admits something unexpected. To be honest, when he questioned her relationship with her sponsor, he was irritated. Hearing that, Aisha immediately brushes it off. Of course he would feel that way. From her perspective, his reaction makes perfect sense. However, the Duke is not finished. The more he reflected on it, the more ashamed he became. In the end, he felt foolish and petty because he had been acting in the exact opposite way from her. Aisha quickly tries to stop him, insisting that it is fine and there is no need to think so deeply about it. But the Duke continues anyway. Just in case she has forgotten, Abel is an illegitimate child. Even so, she loves him without holding anything back. The moment he says that, Aisha cannot understand why he keeps bringing it up. To her, the answer is simple. Abel is already a cute, sweet, and lovable child exactly as he is. What more is there to discuss? Yet the Duke keeps going. If he were in her position, he would naturally be curious about Abel's birth mother. He would probably feel uncomfortable about it too. Is she really telling him that none of that bothers her? Aisha simply stares at him and asks why any of that even matters. At that point, the Duke's tone turns serious. There are some things he will never compromise on. No matter what happens, he has no intention of changing his decision to make Abel his heir. Abel is precious to him. For his son's sake, there is almost nothing he would not do. Aisha nods because, honestly, she already knows that. Deep inside, she even compares it to her own feelings. If someone asked her to die in Abel's place at this very moment, she does not know if she could bravely agree without fear. Yet, she has admired Abel for 5 whole years. That is how much he means to her. The Duke then makes another confession. If anyone ever harbored evil intentions toward Abel, he would chase them to the very depths of hell if necessary. He would rather do that than live with the regret of letting such a person walk free. Hearing the intensity behind those words makes Aisha flinch, but she cannot deny that he means every single one of them. Then he reveals the one thing he is completely certain about. Aside from Abel's importance to him, he has a clear conscience when it comes to Abel's birth mother. Aisha acknowledges what he is saying, but she is still confused. Why is he telling her all of this? No matter what explanation he gives, her feelings toward young Master Abel are not going to change. She will continue to adore him regardless. At that, the Duke rises to his feet and quietly thanks her. To him, she is the first person he has ever met who offers affection with no conditions attached. Aisha simply smiles and tells him it is nothing special. But the Duke disagrees. Loving someone so deeply, constantly giving without receiving anything in return, sounds exhausting and painful to him. Yet Aisha only laughs. She has never loved people because she expected something back. She has lived that way her entire life. Then, suddenly, the atmosphere changes. The Duke moves closer and sits beside her. Before she can process what is happening, he reaches out and touches her hair. Bringing his face near hers, he quietly refuses to accept her way of thinking. No, he cannot accept that at all. And then, with a gentle kiss placed on her hair, he makes a promise. Whatever he receives from her, he will return just as much in kind. The moment the Duke kisses Lady Aisha's hair, her heart practically goes out of control. Before she can even recover, he quietly continues, explaining that if she is willing to give so much of herself, then he will do the same. He will return everything he receives. More than that, he promises that he will sincerely try his best to love her back. And just like that, our girl receives the shock of her life. Aisha immediately asks what he means, but inside her head, absolute chaos erupts. Wait a second. Does he seriously believe that every gift she gave Abel, the holy sword, the letters, the handkerchief, all of it was because she had feelings for him? At this point, she does not even know where to begin fixing this misunderstanding. Honestly, the situation has become so absurd that words fail her. Her body actually starts to wobble from the shock, forcing the Duke to steady her. Concern immediately appears on his face. Is she all right? Was she really that surprised that he wanted to return her feelings? Hearing that only makes everything click together even more painfully. Suddenly, she remembers all the strange things he had been saying earlier. Bringing up Abel's birth mother. Talking about Abel being illegitimate. Explaining how far he would go to protect his son. Then those terrifying words echo in her mind once again. If anyone held sinister intentions toward Abel, he would chase them to the ends of hell and destroy them. The memory alone is enough to make her panic. Desperately, she blurts out that she wants to go. Unfortunately, she never actually finishes the sentence. Naturally, the Duke asks where exactly she wants to go. Completely lost, She struggles for an answer before awkwardly giving a thumbs up and declaring that she wants to go to her chair. Yes, her chair. The Duke looks at her in complete disbelief. Meanwhile, tears are already forming in her eyes. Seeing that, he assumes she is overwhelmed with happiness. To him, she looks so touched that she might actually cry. Aisha immediately looks away and insists that is not the case at all. These are tears of frustration. Massive, painful misunderstanding-caused frustration. But the Duke simply smiles and chooses not to believe her. According to him, crying one moment and laughing the next is quite an impressive performance. At that point, she practically gives up. Fine. Whatever. She is fine. She truly does not care anymore. Unfortunately, the misunderstanding refuses to die. 2 whole weeks pass, and despite the Duke's sincere declaration that he will do his best to love Lady Aisha back, their relationship barely changes. The funny part is that he remains completely determined to reciprocate what he believes are her feelings. Meanwhile, Aisha spends an hour every single day practicing how to hide her expressions, yet all her efforts are completely useless. At this point, she is honestly getting used to people looking at her strangely. Then, one day, a knock sounds at the door. Expecting Abel, she immediately calls for the visitor to come in, and even wonders if it is him. Instead, the Duke walks inside. He greets her warmly and asks if she slept well. Then he explains that they will practice in her room today, since she is always the one going to his. Surely it must be tiring constantly making the trip. Aisha tries to insist that it is really not a problem, but he has already made up his mind. However, before the conversation can continue, something on the table catches his attention. A small bottle. Curious, he points at it and asks what it is. Aisha casually answers that it is medication. The moment he hears that word, his expression changes. Medication? Does that mean she is sick? At this point, things seem to be moving smoothly for our girl. When Hades notices the medicine she keeps with her, Aisha quickly explains that it is not because she is seriously sick. She has been taking it since she was very young because her body is naturally weak. They are more like supplements, though technically she does take them because of a health condition. She even reassures him that it is nothing that will kill her, although, ironically, Aisha had actually died at 18 before. That little detail stays buried in her heart. Hades picks up the bottle and looks at it carefully, wondering if she even knows what she is taking. Aisha honestly admits that she has used it since she was around Abel's age, and is not a doctor, so she does not know every detail. However, she knows one thing for certain. These medicines are not random remedies from the countryside. They are made and delivered directly by the temple. Hearing that, Hades is not surprised. In fact, he comments that she looks exactly like the kind of person who would carry medicine everywhere. Then he grabs her wrist and immediately notices how thin she is. Honestly, this man cannot stop worrying about her. He points out that her wrists are as thin as twigs, and begins wondering just how close the Ascliffe family must be to the temple. After all, the temple rarely gives this much attention to ordinary people. Surely there must be someone there who keeps in contact with her. That is when Hades drops a piece of news that completely catches Aisha off guard. Before meeting with his vassals, he had already announced their marriage to the surrounding territories. Naturally, the temple should have heard about it, yet there was no response. However, the moment he sent another notice and specifically mentioned Aisha Ascliffe by name, the temple contacted him urgently, and even expressed a desire to visit as soon as the next day. Now, Aisha is completely confused. The temple? For her, she knows the original novel inside and out, and not once was she connected to the temple. She is not even a side character in that story. So why would such an important organization suddenly rush to see her? Trying to make sense of it, she guesses that her father must have maintained a strong relationship with them over the years. After all, he was the one who arranged for her medicine since childhood. Thinking about Baron Ascliffe fills her with warmth. During the 3 years she lived as Aisha, he had been a kind and loving father who always worried about her fragile health. Just imagining that he might have worked with the temple all this time makes her even more grateful. Meanwhile, Hades moves the discussion forward. Things are about to become busy. The temple's representatives are coming, and the messenger sent to Ascliffe regarding the marriage should also return today or tomorrow. Aisha nearly jumps out of her seat. Today or tomorrow? It had taken her almost 2 months to travel there herself. Hades can only stare at her in disbelief. He is more shocked that she somehow crossed the continent with only 1 maid and 1 bodyguard while constantly switching between hired carriages. This is an official marriage matter. Of course, he hired wind and earth elementalists who can travel across the continent with ease. Honestly, this man really is spending without hesitation. Then again, his next words explain everything. He is asking for the hand of another man's most precious daughter. That response leaves Aisha smiling to herself. In her mind, she cannot help thinking that if not for Hades' enormous ego, she might eventually start standing him too. Still, her biggest dream remains unchanged. She is already imagining the future where Abel finally calls her mom. Hallelujah indeed. If the marriage becomes official, even if it is only on paper, she will finally have the legal right to stand proudly beside him. Just picturing it makes her drift into a happy daydream. Hades notices immediately and asks if she is really that happy. Of course she is. Hearing that, he promises once again to speed up the wedding preparations as much as possible and asks her to trust him. Aisha gratefully agrees, but then Hades takes one look at her thin frame and decides on a completely different mission. Before the wedding, he wants to fatten her up a little. There is no way he is letting her faint in front of a crowd during the ceremony. Aisha immediately protests and jokingly asks if he thinks she is made of paper. Deep down, though, she knows her body truly is weak. There was even a time when she forgot to take her medicine for only 2 days, and the pain in her heart became so severe it almost stopped beating. Thankfully, things are different now. She takes her medicine regularly and eats properly, so she confidently assures him that while her health is not perfect, she is not about to collapse left and right. Besides, she has the temple's medicine. Everything will be fine. At least, that is what she hopes. After coming this far, there is no turning back. Aisha has already decided she is going to live a very long life. After all, she still has many years ahead of her to spend admiring cute little Abel. The next morning begins quietly enough, but that peace does not last for long. Hades is sitting in his office when a knock suddenly comes from the door. Thinking it is probably just another routine report, he casually allows the visitor to enter. However, the moment the messenger steps inside, everything changes. The messenger quickly reports that the envoy sent to Escliffe has returned. But that is not all. Baron Escliffe himself has arrived as well. For a second, Hades almost cannot believe what he is hearing. Benjamin Escliffe? Here? In person? He immediately asks if the messenger is certain. The answer comes without hesitation. Yes, Your Grace. Baron Escliffe has already arrived in Louvermont and should reach the castle within 30 minutes. And just like that, our Duke completely loses his calm. Instead of sitting there and waiting with dignity, he rushes off to prepare himself. Honestly, the reaction is almost funny. This is the same man who faces nobles, vassals, and political enemies without blinking. Yet the news of Aisha's father arriving has him moving in a hurry. As he changes into proper clothes, one thought keeps running through his head. There was no need for the Baron to come personally. A messenger would have been enough. So why did he come all this way himself? The more he thinks about it, the more restless he becomes. After dressing, he suddenly turns to the servant nearby and asks a very unexpected question. How do I look? The poor servant is completely confused. What does he mean? Seeing the blank expression, Hades immediately clarifies. He is not asking whether he looks handsome. He wants to know if he looks tired. Does he appear worn out? Does he look haggard? The servant can only reassure him that everything looks fine and that he appears as handsome as ever. But that is not the answer Hades is looking for. As he heads out, another realization strikes him. Aisha is the one who desperately wants this marriage. At least, that is what he believes. So why is he the one feeling nervous? Seriously, why is he acting like this? Meanwhile, outside, rain pours heavily from the sky. The weather is gloomy and thunder rumbles in the distance as Benjamin Escliffe finally arrives at Louvermont Manor. The moment he steps forward, he politely introduces himself. Benjamin Escliffe. A father meeting his future son-in-law. At least, that is how it is supposed to be. Hades immediately tells him there is no need for such formal greetings. After all, if everything proceeds as planned, they will soon be family. As a future son-in-law, he does not want Benjamin treating him with excessive formality. The older man seems touched by the gesture. Then Hades apologizes for the sudden nature of the visit. Had he known Benjamin was coming, he would have arranged a much more comfortable journey. Benjamin, however, quickly shakes his head. If anyone should apologize, it is him. After all, he arrived without warning. The exchange is respectful, polite, and surprisingly warm. For a moment, everything seems to be going perfectly. Hades even admits that he is happy to finally meet him in person. And then, Benjamin brings up Aisha. Immediately, Hades assumes the father wants to see his daughter. He explains that Aisha is not present because she was sleeping so peacefully that he could not bring himself to wake her up. There is something strangely gentle about that statement. Without even realizing it, he sounds like someone who genuinely cares. Wanting to be a good host, he invites Benjamin inside. The doors open. The maids line up to welcome the Baron. Everything looks exactly like the beginning of a successful family meeting. Hades even suggests that Benjamin wash up and rest first, since he must be exhausted from such a long trip. And then, everything falls apart. Without warning, Benjamin's expression turns serious. The atmosphere changes instantly. The warmth disappears. The friendliness vanishes. Even the rain outside somehow feels heavier. Benjamin explains that he actually came to deliver bad news. Those words alone are enough to make anyone nervous. Bad news? What bad news? Before Hades can fully process what is happening, the Baron continues. He says he has come here for one reason, to take his daughter back. For a moment, it feels as if time stops. Hades is stunned, completely stunned. Of all the things he expected to hear, this was not one of them. Not even close. The man who rushed to prepare himself. The man who worried about how he looked. The man who was already thinking of Benjamin as family, now stands there unable to hide his shock. And then comes the final blow. Benjamin bows deeply. His voice remains respectful, but the words hit harder than any sword. He apologizes. Truly apologizes. But despite everything, despite the preparations, despite the discussions, despite the plans already moving forward, he cannot give his approval for the marriage. Just like that, the future Hades thought was beginning to take shape suddenly hangs by a thread. The wedding preparations, the dowry, the temple's upcoming visit, Aisha's dreams, everything. In a single moment, all of it is thrown into uncertainty. And honestly, if Hades thought dealing with stubborn advisors was difficult, things have just become far worse. Because this time, the obstacle standing before him is not a noble, a rival, or a political enemy. It is Aisha's father. And unlike everyone else, this is a man whose approval he absolutely needs. The rain continues pouring outside without mercy when loud banging suddenly echoes through Lady Aisha's room. Still half asleep, she sluggishly rolls over on her bed and groans. What is it at the crack of dawn? Whoever is making that much noise had better have a good reason. But then she hears a familiar voice calling her name over and over. Aisha! Aisha! Are you awake? If you are, let's talk! Aisha! The urgency in Hades' voice is impossible to ignore. Immediately, she sits up and calls back that she is awake and that he can come in. The door flies open almost at once, and the moment she sees him, she freezes. Forget the panic in his voice. The man himself looks exhausted. Honestly, he looks like someone who has not slept all night. Concern immediately replaces her irritation. She points out how tired he looks and gently touches his face. Of course, she quickly adds that he is still handsome as always. She does not want him getting the wrong idea. It is just that he looks so worn out that she cannot help worrying. Hades quickly assures her that he did not misunderstand, but it is obvious that something serious is bothering him. Then, he finally gets to the point. At dawn, the messenger he sent to Escliffe returned. Not only that, but Baron Escliffe came back with him. Hearing that, Aisha is surprised but not alarmed. After all, why would that be a problem? She had expected her father to approve the marriage, sign the necessary papers, and send them back. If he came personally, then what is making Hades this agitated? In fact, she jokingly wonders if her father showed up dragging 100 cows behind him. That would practically be the entire Escliffe family fortune. Even while joking, she absentmindedly touches her own face, wondering if she looks as tired as Hades does. Unfortunately, the news gets much worse. Hades places a hand on her shoulder and delivers the bombshell. Benjamin Escliffe said he cannot allow the marriage to happen. Just like that, Aisha's sleepiness disappears. She practically jumps in shock. What? What does that even mean? Hades calmly answers that it means exactly what it sounds like. Her father does not approve. Naturally, the next question comes immediately. Why? And the explanation she receives leaves her completely baffled. According to Benjamin, the Escliffe family has preserved the light element for generations, so he intends to marry his only daughter to a man who possesses the same element. Aisha can barely believe what she is hearing. To her, it sounds like complete nonsense. Even Hades admits that it makes little sense. After all, Benjamin plans to make Aisha's uncle, Sir Rifner, the heir, doesn't he? The moment he mentions that detail, Aisha is caught off guard. How does he know that? Honestly, sometimes it feels like this man knows everything. Hades immediately reminds her that he was not about to marry someone without first learning the basic circumstances of her family. Fair enough. Aisha can only smile awkwardly at that. As expected, the Duke's information network is frighteningly thorough. Then, her thoughts drift deeper into the matter. Maintaining the light element truly is an Escliffe tradition. As the first person in line to inherit and preserve that bloodline, Aisha had originally been expected to marry someone with the same element. Light is the most recessive of all the elements. When mixed with another element, it easily disappears. If it combines with fire, the most dominant element, the result is obvious. However, none of that should apply to her. Even before she awakened in this body, Aisha Escliffe had never been considered a true successor. The reason was simple: her health. In a world where reliable treatment depends heavily on the blessings of Light Temple priests, people born with weak bodies often die young. Because of that, families frequently remove them from succession, even when they have a legitimate claim. That had always been Aisha's situation. She was never supposed to inherit. She was never meant to carry on the bloodline, which leaves one huge question hanging in the air. If all of that is true, then why would her father suddenly oppose this marriage for that reason? And just like that, what should have been a simple approval turns into an even bigger mystery. Meanwhile, Aisha is trying to make sense of this unbelievable situation. The more she thinks about it, the less it adds up. After all, there was always someone ready to inherit the family title in her place. Her mother's second youngest brother, her uncle, had already been chosen as the heir long ago. Because of that, she never carried the burden of preserving the family's bloodline. In fact, her father had always treated her differently. He never pressured her. He never demanded anything from her. Instead, he was always filled with regret over her weak health. Time and time again, he would tell his frail daughter the same thing. Aisha, I just want you to live happily. Live however you want and marry whoever you wish. And honestly, remembering those words now only makes this situation even stranger. In her mind, she can't help thinking that if she had dragged some random beggar off the street and announced she wanted to marry him, her father probably would have smiled and given his blessing. So, why would he suddenly oppose this marriage? Looking at the Duke, she asks if there could have been some misunderstanding, but the answer comes back immediately. No, he is certain. In fact, the Baron personally admitted that Aisha had no obligation to pass down the light element. Yet somehow, for reasons neither of them can understand, he is still against the marriage. At this point, Aisha shakes her head. Her father has absolutely no reason to oppose this. She knows that better than anyone. The only explanation she can think of is the difference in status. Maybe he believes a daughter of the Ascliffe family does not belong beside someone carrying the mighty Louvermont name. But the moment those words leave her mouth, the Duke's reaction is immediate. He bends down until he is right in front of her and practically blurts it out. He does not care about that. All he needs is her. And wow, our girl is completely caught off guard. For a brief moment, she feels like some poor commoner who has just been proposed to by a handsome heir from a giant empire. Still, she gathers herself and thanks him, but insists that cannot be the reason. Judging from her father's reaction, something else is going on. There has to be another explanation. Just as they are trying to figure it out, the conversation suddenly comes to a halt. Both of them turn toward the doorway and find Abel standing there holding a glass of milk. And immediately, the atmosphere changes. The question hits both of them at the same time. How much did he hear? Abel quietly walks in and says he came to bring milk for Lady Aisha. But one look at his face is enough to tell something is wrong. Aisha quickly whispers to the Duke to close the door, but it is already too late. Tears begin gathering in Abel's eyes as he asks the question neither of them wanted to hear. Is the Baron against this marriage? The Duke immediately rushes to deny it. Aisha does the same. Both of them try to reassure him, but Abel is already drawing his own conclusion. In his mind, there is only one possible reason. It has to be because of him. Instantly, both adults reject that idea. No, it is not because of him. Not even a little. But the poor boy is already blaming himself. He starts talking about how his father has been unable to marry until now, clearly convinced that he is the problem. Before he can finish, Aisha moves straight to his side and pulls him close. Then she firmly cuts off that line of thinking. No, young master. If His Grace has not married until now, that is His Grace's fault, not yours. The Duke is left completely stunned. His fault? What exactly did he do? But Aisha has no intention of letting him interrupt. Right now, Abel comes first. She focuses entirely on comforting him, assuring him that there is nothing to worry about and that the Duke must simply be mistaken. She promises that she will speak directly with her father and sort everything out herself. Little by little, she tries to calm the crying boy. Then, turning back toward the Duke, she asks where her father is staying. He tells her the Baron is in the guest room and even offers to accompany her. But Aisha refuses immediately. No, she will go alone. Meanwhile, he should stay here and comfort young master. And with that, our girl heads off to confront the one person who might finally reveal why this marriage has suddenly become such a huge problem. Just when it seems like Aisha is finally about to get some answers, chaos explodes at the door. Anne suddenly bursts in, slamming it open and calling out for her miss. Then she freezes for a moment after noticing that both the Duke and Abel are already there. Aisha immediately asks what is wrong, but before Anne can properly explain, another figure rushes in. Benjamin Escliffe himself. The Baron practically storms into the room and calls out for his daughter, only to stop when he notices everyone gathered together. The tension in the room becomes so thick you could almost touch it. Abel, however, still politely steps forward and introduces himself. He greets the Baron properly and gives his name. Benjamin returns the greeting and introduces himself as well, but then unexpectedly apologizes, claiming that his daughter has caused trouble. And honestly, that one sentence is enough to make everyone's hearts tighten. Abel immediately shakes his head. Trouble? Not at all. In fact, ever since Lady Aisha arrived in the north, his days have been filled with happiness. He wants her to stay there forever. Ouch. That one lands directly in the heart. The moment Aisha hears that, she instantly realizes what is happening. Poor Abel still believes he is the reason the marriage might fall apart, so now he is desperately trying to win her father's approval. Seeing that only makes her even more determined to settle this once and for all. Without wasting another second, she turns directly toward her father and asks the question that has been hanging over everyone's heads. She heard from the Duke that he opposes the marriage. Surely there has been a mistake, right? Surely he does not really mean it. But Benjamin hesitates, and that hesitation alone is enough to send alarm bells ringing. Aisha immediately presses further. If it is true, then she wants the reason. However, there is one thing she makes absolutely clear. No matter what the answer is, she has no intention of giving up this marriage. Benjamin desperately tries to reason with her. He tells her she is still young and does not understand what the Louvermont Duchy is truly like. According to him, it is not a place she can handle. But before that argument can go any further, the Duke cuts in sharply. Is that really what the Baron is worried about? Even after he promised to make sure Aisha never feels burdened? Yet Benjamin refuses to back down. Instead, he drops a statement that leaves everyone stunned. One day, the Duke will regret bringing this girl into the duchy. Louvermont and Escliffe are incompatible, and according to him, nobody should understand that better than the Duke himself. Immediately, Aisha snaps. She cannot hold back any longer. Why is her father suddenly saying these things now? Wasn't he the one who always told her to marry whoever she wanted? Wasn't he the one who insisted she would be too good for any man she chose? Benjamin tries to respond, but Aisha has already reached her limit. In her mind, none of this makes sense. Her father should be celebrating. Soon she could become the Duchess of Louvermont. The Ascliffe barony would gain prestige and attention. The Duke is already facing opposition because of this marriage, and Abel has been looking forward to it with all his heart. Most importantly, she cannot bear seeing Abel cry anymore. At that moment, our girl decides to go all in. She fixes her father with a fierce stare and admits that she never wanted to act like a stubborn daughter. She wanted to be respectful. She wanted to handle this properly. But if he continues refusing to approve the marriage, then she might just go out and die. The entire room freezes. Abel immediately cries out in panic. Benjamin is completely shaken. He tries to stop her, begging her to understand why he is so flustered. From his perspective, everything happened too fast. He allowed her to travel north, but before even a month had passed, marriage papers suddenly arrived at his doorstep. How could he not be shocked? Yet Aisha refuses to back down. Her feelings did not appear overnight. They have existed for years. She has carried them for a very long time. And because of that, she cannot live without this person. Then comes the final declaration, delivered with all the determination she can muster. If her father refuses to approve this marriage, she will really kill herself. And with those explosive words hanging in the air, the confrontation reaches a boiling point, leaving everyone in the room stunned as the battle between a stubborn father and an equally stubborn daughter grows more intense than ever. The moment Aisha boldly declares that she will really kill herself if this marriage is stopped, the entire room falls into complete silence. Nobody knows how to respond. Even the air seems frozen. Finally, the Duke lets out a small cough, scoops Abel into his arms, and decides this is no longer a conversation they should be present for. Benjamin glances toward his daughter and quickly asks for a private discussion. The Duke immediately agrees, carrying Abel toward the door while wishing them a fruitful conversation. Then the door closes, leaving father and daughter alone. But instead of continuing the heated argument about marriage, Benjamin rushes over, grabs Aisha's hand, and asks something so unexpected that it completely throws her off balance. Has she been taking her medication properly? Is she still taking it consistently even after arriving in the north? Aisha stares at him in disbelief. Out of everything they could be talking about right now, why is he suddenly asking about medicine? Benjamin awkwardly explains that he was simply worried she might have forgotten. However, that answer only makes things feel stranger. Just moments ago, they were arguing about marriage. Now he is worried about pills. Something is definitely not right here. At that moment, pieces begin connecting inside Aisha's mind. She remembers the conversation she had with the Duke earlier. He had asked whether she even knew what she was taking. Back then, she confidently brushed it aside, explaining that the medicine was manufactured and delivered by the temple. But now, looking back, something feels off. The temple has been sending her medication for years, yet they never once contacted her personally. Then suddenly, the moment her marriage is announced, everything changes. The Duke had told her that the temple ignored the first notice. But after hearing her name, they urgently sent a reply and even expressed a desire to come visit in person. On top of that, her father rushed all the way to the north to stop the marriage, yet still refuses to give a proper reason. The more she thinks about it, the stranger it becomes. What if those pills are not simply supplements after all? What if there is something everyone knows except her? Still, she keeps those thoughts to herself and calmly assures her father that she has been taking the medication consistently. Immediately, relief washes over Benjamin's face. He looks genuinely comforted by that answer. Then, without missing a beat, he returns to the same request. Please reconsider the marriage. According to him, Duke Louvermont is not a man she can handle. This time, however, Aisha does not argue. Instead, she hums thoughtfully and tells him that if he insists so strongly, she will think about it more. But she cannot simply abandon the marriage overnight. She has been treating it seriously from the beginning. Meanwhile, deep inside, her suspicion continues growing. Those pills are definitely hiding something. Outside the room, the Duke is having a much harder time staying calm. This proud man is pacing back and forth like someone waiting for a verdict. Every minute feels longer than the last. Eventually, the private conversation comes to an end. Benjamin exits first and immediately encounters the Duke waiting outside. He politely bows and apologizes before moving on. The Duke stops him briefly, assuring him there is no need to apologize. Then, moments later, Aisha finally emerges as well. Together, they watch the Baron walk away down the hall. Naturally, the Duke cannot hold back any longer. He immediately asks what happened. Did the conversation change anything? Aisha simply explains that her father is still here and that she intends to keep trying to convince him. The discussion is not over yet. While speaking, she quietly realizes something else. The Duke had been waiting outside the entire time. He had genuinely been worried. The moment he hears that there is still hope, a visible sigh of relief escapes him. That alone tells her how much this marriage means to him. Seeing his reaction, Aisha reassures him that there is nothing to worry about. And then, with complete confidence, she drops a statement that would make most nobles faint on the spot. If her father continues refusing to approve the marriage, she can simply petition the Imperial Palace and have her name removed from the family register altogether. Just like that, our girl reveals she is already thinking several moves ahead. While everyone else is trapped trying to understand Benjamin's mysterious objections, Aisha has started focusing on something even bigger: the strange connection between her medication, the temple's sudden interest in her, and the secret her father seems desperate to keep hidden. And honestly, The deeper this mystery gets, the more it feels like the real reason behind this marriage dispute has nothing to do with marriage at all. As the two continue talking, Aisha calmly explains the reality of marriage laws in the Crescenta Empire. The system is incredibly old-fashioned. Ordinary nobles cannot simply marry whoever they want. Without the approval of the family head, the marriage cannot happen. The only other option is far more drastic, having your name removed from the family register entirely. Once that happens, you are no longer tied to your noble house. In other words, if she abandons the Ascliffe surname, she would no longer need her father's approval. All it would take would be her own agreement, a thumbprint, and the marriage could move forward. Simple. Well, simple in theory at least. The moment the Duke hears her suggest something so extreme, he immediately objects. There is no need for her to go that far, but Aisha simply points out the obvious. There is a huge difference between marrying a noblewoman from a respected family and marrying someone who has become little more than a commoner with no status, no backing, and no family name. Because of that, she apologizes. And, wow, that turns out to be the wrong thing to say. Instantly, the Duke's voice rises. What is she talking about? The sudden outburst catches Aisha completely off guard. She practically jumps and complains that he startled her, but the Duke is not backing down. He grabs her hand and demands to know what kind of person she thinks he is. Does he really look like a man who would care about something like that? Why is she apologizing? Then he goes even further. According to him, even if she were a runaway slave seeking a legal refuge, he would not care in the slightest. Honestly, even Aisha thinks that is taking things a little too far. Still, the Duke remains completely serious. He insists he would never mind if she chose such a drastic path. What bothers him is something else entirely. It does not sit right with him to force her into sacrificing her relationship with her family. Thankfully, Aisha quickly reassures him. She is not planning to jump straight to that option. First, she intends to keep trying to convince her father. As long as Benjamin remains in the north, she will continue talking to him. Hearing that finally allows the Duke to relax a little. A sigh escapes him as some of the tension leaves his shoulders. However, after a brief silence, Aisha calls out to him again. This time, there is something she wants to ask. The Duke immediately tells her to go ahead. But before speaking, her thoughts begin racing. The medication, the strange behavior of her father, the temple's sudden interest in her. None of it makes sense anymore. She no longer wants to keep swallowing medicine when she does not even know what it truly is or why she needs it. The problem is that investigating the medicine means investigating the temple itself. And that is no small matter. The temple stands second only to the imperial family in power and influence. Digging into its secrets could create enormous trouble, even for the mighty Louvermont Duchy. Yet before she can fully explain any of this, the Duke cuts straight through her hesitation. He tells her to listen carefully. Soon she will become his wife, one of his people, and his people do not need to hesitate when asking him for help. In fact, he does not even need to hear the request first. Whatever she asks for, he will grant it. Just like that. Aisha blinks in surprise and asks if he truly means it. His answer comes without the slightest hesitation. Of course. In this empire, there is nothing he could not do for her. Then he smiles with complete confidence. And honestly, hearing that reminds Aisha exactly what kind of man she is dealing with. This is Hades Louvermont, a man who could easily shake the empire itself if it meant protecting Abel. And now, it seems that same determination extends to her as well. With that realization, she grips her dress and reaches for something she wants to show him. The moment she does, the Duke's eyes widen in surprise, and suddenly it feels like yet another shocking revelation is about to unfold. At this point, Lady Aisha can no longer ignore the strange feeling in her heart. She takes out the medication she has been carrying and shows it to the Duke. The moment he sees it, he immediately recognizes it. Isn't this the medicine you've been taking? Of course it is. That is exactly why Aisha has come to him. She explains that the pills were made by the temple and sent to her regularly, so she simply accepted them and kept taking them without ever questioning what they actually were. But now, things feel different. Now they seem suspicious. The Duke picks up one of the tablets and studies it carefully. Aisha admits that she trusted it because it came from the temple, but after everything that has happened recently, she can no longer shake the feeling that something is wrong. The moment he hears that, his decision is instant. Out. It will take about half a day. I'll be back, so wait for me. Just like that. No hesitation, no doubts, no long discussion. Naturally, Aisha is surprised. She expected questions. A lot of questions. Instead, the Duke is already preparing to investigate. Confused, she asks if he is not going to ask anything else. But the answer she gets is surprisingly simple. What would I ask? If she is bringing him a request like this, then she clearly has a reason. That alone is enough for him. Even then, Aisha still worries. Secretly investigating something connected to the temple is not a small matter. The temple is one of the most powerful organizations in the empire. Digging into its affairs could easily become dangerous. But the Duke narrows his eyes and practically dismisses the concern. Was she really worried about that? If he spent his life worrying about every little thing he did, he would never accomplish anything. Besides, this task would not take long at all. When Aisha hears him confidently claim it will only take half a day, she can barely believe it. Half a day? Really? The Duke simply smiles. Honestly, he is being generous. He only needs a very small amount of time because he already knows exactly who can handle the job. And wow, Aisha cannot help but admire that confidence. This man really charges straight through obstacles as if they do not exist. In her mind, she finds herself thinking that if not for his enormous ego, he might honestly be just as easy to adore as Abel. High praise coming from her. Then, before leaving, the Duke gently pats her head. The gesture catches her off guard. Don't worry. Aisha blinks in confusion. Worry? Apparently, he noticed something she did not even realize herself. According to him, she has not looked like her usual self lately. She asks if that is really true, and the Duke gives her an answer that feels strangely comforting. She has nothing to fear. He already promised that he would never make her worry. Then, without another word, he tells her he will return and leaves. Meanwhile, left alone in the library, Aisha tries to read a book while waiting. Unfortunately, her mind refuses to focus. Instead, her thoughts keep circling back to the temple. The more she thinks about it, the stranger everything feels. After all, Aisha Escliffe is not even an important character in the original story. She is not a heroine, she is not a villain, she is not even a side character. In contrast, the temple is one of the most important powers in the entire novel. It drives major events and influences the story from beginning to end. Yet somehow, the completely insignificant Escliffe barony appears to have a connection to it. That alone is enough to make her uneasy. Still, there are reasons she never questioned the medication before. First, the temple itself is portrayed as completely good in the novel. The apostles and clerics are all citizens blessed with the light element, an element used only for healing. They spend their lives helping people in need. They are supposed to be kind, compassionate people. Under those circumstances, how could she possibly suspect them? Second, the medicine clearly works. Every time she takes it, she feels fine. The one time she neglected it, she suffered terribly and practically went through hell. Because of that experience, she never had any reason to doubt it. So no, she was not blindly swallowing mysterious pills because she was foolish. There simply were no warning signs. No obvious reason to be suspicious. And yet, despite all of that, her instincts continue screaming that something is wrong. What if the temple has been deliberately keeping her medicated all this time? The thought sends a chill through her. But then another question immediately follows. Why? Why would an organization as powerful as the temple care about some country baron's daughter? A girl with no influence, no importance, and not even a trace of mana? The idea sounds absurd. Even more confusing is Deborah's existence. Deborah, the heroine, is closely connected to the temple. According to Abel's own words in the novel, Deborah is practically an angel walking among humans. If an angel ever appeared in the world, it would be her. But suddenly, Aisha freezes. Wait, the novel was not written from an all-knowing perspective. Everything was shown through Abel's eyes. Unlike other romance stories, every character, every event, every judgment came directly from Abel's point of view. If Abel believed someone was good, then the story portrayed them as good. Readers only saw what Abel saw, and just like that, a terrifying possibility begins to form. What if Abel was wrong? What if the temple was never what it appeared to be? What if, by some chance, the temple was actually an evil organization that had been deceiving Abel all along? And if that is true, then the mystery surrounding Aisha's medication may be far bigger than anyone imagined. As Aisha sits alone, trying to make sense of everything, an old memory suddenly resurfaces. Before she transmigrated into this body, there had been one question she desperately wanted to ask the author of the novel. It was the only thing she could never fully understand, no matter how many times she reread the story. The novel's title was Persona, a mask, a Latin word meaning a false personality. Back then, she never found the answer, but now a frightening possibility begins to take shape. What if the title itself was the clue? What if, aside from Abel, the story's narrator, everything she thought she knew about every other character had been filtered through a mask? What if the truth had been hidden the entire time? And then, as if the universe chooses the perfect moment to make things even worse, the door suddenly opens. The Duke has returned. The moment Aisha sees him, her heart jumps. Not because she is startled by the door opening, but because she can immediately tell something is wrong. His expression is serious, very serious. Before she can even ask what happened, he looks directly at her and asks a question that sends a chill down her spine. Aisha, why exactly have you been taking this all this time? At once, her anxiety spikes. Why? What did they do? The answer hits like a bolt of lightning. Those pills are used to suppress mana so it cannot manifest. For a second, everything seems to stop. The Duke explains that because she believed the medicine was treating a chronic illness, he examined it for medical properties. He searched for anything that could help the body. Anything that could explain why she had been taking it for so many years. He found nothing. Not a single medicinal effect. The pills have only one purpose: to suppress mana. And just like that, the foundation beneath Aisha's feet begins to crack. Trying to understand, she admits that she does not really know what suppressing mana means. But the Duke continues. In fact, the reason she has never been able to properly hide her nexus until now is because of this medication. Suddenly, a piece of the puzzle clicks into place. Of course, you need mana to hide your nexus. Yet, while that answers one question, it creates 10 more. The Duke immediately asks the most important one. Why was she taking it? Unfortunately, Aisha herself has no answer. Instead, she asks something much simpler. Is he absolutely sure the medicine does not help with her illness at all? Because every time she goes without it, she suffers. The pain is real. She has felt it herself. The ache in her chest becomes so intense, it feels as if her heart is being crushed. But the Duke's response completely overturns everything she thought she knew. There is no way it could have hurt from the beginning. Aisha stares at him, confused. What does he mean? Then comes the explanation that changes everything. The medication suppresses mana. It keeps it trapped. It prevents it from flowing naturally through her body. If she suddenly stops taking the pills, that mana begins moving again after being forcefully contained for years. And considering how weak her body already is, of course that process would be painful. The pain was never proof that the medicine was helping her. The pain happened because the medicine had been stopping something natural all along. And wow, the moment those words sink in, every strange event suddenly starts connecting together. The temple supplying her medication for years. The temple immediately reacting when they learned she was getting married. Her father's desperate opposition to the marriage. The Duke's questions. The suspicious timing. Everything. One by one, the pieces begin falling into place. Aisha can only sit there in shock as the realization crashes over her. What if the story she trusted was never telling her the full truth? What if the temple is not what it appears to be? What if the medicine she has faithfully swallowed since childhood was never medicine at all? And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all, what if everything she knows has been built on a lie? At that moment, Aisha is no longer simply confused. She is terrified. Because for the first time since arriving in this world, she is forced to consider a possibility she never wanted to face. Maybe the truth has been hidden behind a mask this entire time. For a moment, Aisha's entire world feels like it is turning upside down. The original Aisha had been a quiet, obedient child who simply trusted the medicine her father brought for her weak body. And honestly, our girl had done the same. She believed a loving father had found treatment for his sickly daughter. But now everything feels wrong. Was Benjamin aware of what those pills really were? Was the temple acting alone, or was her father somehow involved too? The thought hurts more than she wants to admit. Looking at the Duke, she asks if he is really saying the medication is what made her sick all this time. Unfortunately, his answer is immediate. Yes, the pills came from the Baron, and they were given to her for a reason. Even so, Aisha refuses to condemn her father so quickly. Deep down, she is suspicious too, but she wants proof before making such a painful judgment. After all, no matter what is happening, Benjamin was the first person who showed her genuine family love. She might have talked boldly about abandoning her surname, but actually doing it is another matter entirely. Then, another question rises to the surface. Why would the temple go through all this trouble? Why suppress her mana? Her family is known for having very little mana, so what could possibly be gained by sealing away what should have been nothing more than a tiny amount? That is when the Duke drops another bombshell. Maybe her mana was never tiny to begin with. If she truly had as little mana as the other Escliffs, then missing a few pills would not have caused such unbearable pain. But the moment the suppressant wore off, an enormous amount of mana tried to burst free all at once. That is why it felt as though she was dying. And just like that, another terrifying possibility appears. If her mana is truly that powerful, could it somehow threaten the temple? The Duke admits he does not know the answer yet, but he intends to find out. At this point, Aisha has uncovered 3 shocking truths almost back to back. First, the pills were never medicine. Second, she may possess an extraordinary amount of mana. Third, there is a reason the temple has been secretly suppressing that mana for years. Suddenly, the temple she once viewed as purely good no longer seems so simple. Even the novel itself can no longer be trusted as the absolute truth. Seeing the shock written across her face, the Duke gently reaches out and touches her cheek. His voice remains calm, but his promise carries weight. He will investigate the temple thoroughly, and if he discovers any malicious intent behind what was done to her, he will use every bit of his power to punish those responsible. Aisha quietly nods, but before she can process everything, he reveals there is still one more matter they need to discuss. The real reason Benjamin opposes the marriage. According to the Duke, there is a strong possibility the Baron wants to prevent them from investigating the temple. Aisha is stunned. Her father? Really? The Duke explains that in the entire empire, only 2 forces possess enough power to openly investigate the temple: the imperial family and the Louvre-Mont duchy. If Aisha joins the duchy, it would only be a matter of time before he discovers her inability to hide her nexus, notices the strange pills, grows suspicious, and begins digging into the truth. Yet despite all of this, he still wants to believe the temple acted for a humanitarian reason. Unfortunately, with every new revelation, that hope is becoming harder and harder to hold on to. And just like that, what began as a simple marriage dispute is starting to look like a secret that reaches far deeper than anyone ever imagined. Aisha quietly agrees with the Duke. She does not want to believe the temple has been harming her on purpose either, because if that turns out to be true, then the implications are terrifying. In her mind, one thought immediately stands out above all the others. Deborah. If the temple is truly hiding something, then there is a chance she may eventually have to stand against Deborah herself. And that is the last thing she wants. Trying to make sense of everything, she brings up the Holy Maiden. If one were to appear, powerful groups would surely fight over who controlled her. The Duke confirms it immediately. Even 500 years ago, when Abella Escliffe was alive, countless invasions took place. Different forces constantly tried to abduct her. Hearing that, Aisha cannot help understanding why. A holy maiden who could freely use light element abilities would be a prize beyond imagination. To possess someone like that would be almost the same as winning a war before it even began. The conversation soon returns to the present, and the Duke makes one thing clear. The safest place for her while she stops taking the pills and allows her body to return to normal is right here, under his protection. Aisha agrees, but another problem quickly appears. The Baron has already declared that he will never approve the marriage. Because of that, the Duke proposes something drastic. Until the investigation into the temple is finished, it may be best to make it appear as though he is keeping her in the duchy against her will. Aisha is stunned. If that happens, everyone will think he is a shameless tyrant who kidnapped a powerless noblewoman and refused to let her leave. His reputation would be destroyed. Yet he brushes the concern aside without hesitation. He has already thought about it during his journey. If the investigation reveals the temple is guilty, everything will make sense in the end. Even then, Aisha still feels uneasy. However, the Duke stops her and speaks with complete certainty. From now on, she does not need to feel guilty or indebted to him. This is not a burden she placed on him. It is a choice he is making for her sake. Then his expression turns serious. He has already sent a reply to the temple and requested that their visit take place 4 days later. Until then, there is much to prepare. He immediately asks how long remains before her next dose. Aisha reveals that she already skipped her morning medication. Thankfully, there is no pain yet. Hearing that, the Duke takes control of the situation at once. He will keep the remaining pills himself. From this moment onward, she must not leave the room. Nobody can be allowed to discover what happens to her body once she stops taking the medicine. Not the Baron, not the servants, and not even the maid and guard who accompanied her from Ascliffe. That warning hits harder than expected. Aisha instinctively wants to object, but the words die before they leave her mouth. At this point, her entire world feels uncertain. The people she trusted may be hiding secrets. The temple she believed was good may not be what it seems. Even the story she thought she understood could have been built on half-truths. As those thoughts swirl through her mind, she arrives at a painful conclusion. Right now, there are only 2 people she feels she can trust completely. Abel, the true first-person narrator of the novel whose thoughts she knows better than anyone, and the man standing before her, the father who once sacrificed his life for Abel's sake. That alone makes him trustworthy in her eyes. Meanwhile, the Duke's hand tightens into a fist as his voice grows firm and unwavering. Until the truth is uncovered, she must trust no one. No one at all. Suddenly, the mystery surrounding the pills is no longer the only danger. The real question now is far more frightening. If even the people closest to Aisha might be hiding the truth, then who is actually on her side? Enjoying this so far? Comment male lead for part 3. Until next time, ciao.